Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, welcome to the 10-year anniversary episode of Norse Code. Do you have anything to say to our listeners?
I cannot think of something I am more simultaneously proud and ashamed of than hitting a 10-year anniversary for a Vikings podcast. what are all of you doing? The weirdest thing is you can look at download numbers or a follower count on Twitter or whatever and be like, that's a weird big number. I can't really, your brain just doesn't have to do a good job of conceiving that number, right? Then you go to a live show and it's a pretty big bar or something and it is packed and you're like, what? No way. What is going on? They can't all be here for this. People just wear Viking stuff all the time. And then you turn the corner and someone is wearing your face on their shirt. You're like, okay, yeah. I would say this. And I can say this because we're not sponsored by BetterHelp. You are all deeply damaged humans. And it would be responsible for me to say that you should seek help that is not this podcast. But I have a financial incentive to tell you, no, keep going. Thank you for listening to the show.
Thank you guys so much for supporting us, the three of us over the years, Dusty being in the wings, in the ether. But again, thank you so much. It has meant a lot. This is kind of a crazy period of time, and the fact that this is coincides with 10 years of Norse Code, quite frankly, is hysterical to both of us. So,
just an idea that started at the spark of my brother's wedding, which, by the way, he is happy to announce the podcast is outlasted.
By a lot, actually.
Yeah, right.
If we're being honest.
Yes.
Bloom has been off that rose for a while.
Yeah.
For our Shad's relationship corner. No,
but yes. So yeah, just a crazy Dusty approaches me. Hey, I've done this, 2 other times. There were no Vikings podcast. That's the real thing, right? Is there's no chance that we're where we are today if we didn't have this crazy first mover advantage. There were 2 other Vikings podcasts. I don't think they're running anymore, so I feel more liberated to say they were awful. They just were not very high quality podcasts, which makes sense. Most podcasts, most of the time, are awful, but particularly back then. And so we just had to be a 25% competent, and we barely cleared that hurdle, and now you're listening to it.
Yep, this is the hurdle, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to it. And with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. The intro is going to go a little long here because we have a bunch of stuff to talk about before we get into the actual show. But I promise, show is chock full of Viking stuff, and then the mailbag is the opposite. The mailbag has just devolved into 10-year retrospective stuff.
Yeah, usually the mailbag is half Viking stuff, and then people will listen to that and tune out, or they'll skip past it and listen to the second half. We've heard both. But this is not very much Viking stuff in the mailbag. A little bit. Not a ton.
So this is what we got today. But let's get into some of the intro stuff. If you enjoy the show, check us out. We are happy to get your support over at patreon.com/NorseCode. The best way to help with sponsoring us, the best way to help make sure that the show remains ad-free into our 11th year. So thank you guys so much. We do have a special thank you as far as Patreon goes. Jake Tesmar, thank you so much for signing up on Patreon. And Benjamin Hui, I assume I pronounced that correctly. Maybe. We'll see. But thank you so much for signing up on Patreon. Over on Patreon, we get stuff like the bonus episodes. We get stuff, which we had an episode beginning of July, which I'll be putting out another one here shortly. We get the bonus episodes. You get access to the Discord, all of that over at Patreon. And they were also the first people to see the new merch, which we'll talk about in a moment. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. Here's a special announcement. We are going to Denver this year for the Vikings-Broncos game. The game is scheduled for Sunday Night Football at the moment. It's scheduled for November 19th.
Which, remember, these things can flex now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, for now, it's scheduled for Sunday night.
Yep, it's scheduled for Sunday Night Football. Taping will likely be around the 16th or 17th. We have our man on the ground in Denver, working all angles. We're pretty sure we have the venue, but he just needs to check out a couple of things. So that is the plan at the moment. We are going to be doing Denver this year for the away game. I likely won't get COVID, but we'll see. Denver game is what we're aiming for. So November 19th is the game. Taping probably the 16th of November. So check that out. Also, if you'd like to support us, you can go to norsecode.threadless.com, and we have our 10-year anniversary merch that is now out. Draw Play Dave has graciously provided us with a new thing he can complain about as far as not getting residuals. It is a wonderful image. It's of the three of us and a number of our inside jokes kind of circling around the shirt. I enjoy the Luke Braun mask down on the floor.
That's such a nice touch. There's like a couple of it's not like chock full of Easter eggs, but there's like a couple of tiny details that like it's very funny that like this Giants fan is clearly like a listener of the show.
Yep, there was a lot of fun that was had, and last episode we had I'd put in something. Arif had made a comment about what the rough sketch looked like, and said, "Hey, you should make me taller because in canon I'm taller." So I sent that over to Draw Play Dave, and his response is what you heard on the show when I had sent over the response. Arif was crying laughing. It's because when I sent over the message that Arif asked to be taller, Draw Play Dave said, "That's all. That is short person energy. I'm going to make him shorter and the body pillow larger." And
this was only for like lore reasons. Okay, yes. I just want to be clear.
Arif wanted to be bigger on the shirt. Yeah, so that is over
not even
there.
That. It's not even that. Is my physical body could have been the same size, but the high chair that I'm on, right? Like it wasn't even like I just needed to be.
What a wonderful! I'm right now. There is a special over at Threadless, so check it out. You can get the shirts for like a lot cheaper than normal. Like I saw one for $14 today, so check it out. I enjoy the hell out of it. I think it's fantastic.
It's so good.
This is really, really, really good stuff. We almost need a companion podcast for a t-shirt to explain the stuff on it.
You're right? Yeah, it's just like a lore dump. Yeah. So going through every time I go through the Threadless store, there's like some new stupid item that they feature. So like that's how the shower curtain thing became a thing that we ever talked about, or like a baby onesie. We're just like, why would you? Which it turns out a number of you bought baby onesies.
Oh, somebody did buy a baby onesie of the 10-year too, by the way.
Perfect. I'd like to think that it's mostly because we've been pushing it incessantly and not because it's a good idea. But whatever. The thing I found this time, and I don't know if it was like unique to the 10-year anniversary merch. My understanding is that James just said yes to all of the products.
Most.
So Okay, yeah. So I would imagine it's not unique to it, but I found it looking at the 10-year anniversary merch. There's like a skateboard.
Yeah, there's a skateboard you can get.
Like, if you're into skateboarding, I can't imagine getting it from like Threadless or something like that. But they have like tiers of skateboards. So there's like, you could get just the deck, and there's like 3 different tiers of like full skateboard you can have shipped out. I assume they don't like ship it completed, you know, whatever. But there's like a pro, they call it the pro tier or the complete pro or something like that. So yeah, I saw, let's just call him internet personality, Tim Pool, do a sweet trick on his skateboard today. So if you want to be as cool as Tim Pool, you should, I imagine most of the listeners gagged hearing that. You should buy the 10 years of Norse Code skateboard product.
That is the worst pitch I have ever heard on this show. And I used to edit the Audible ads.
Got those ads. Here's the thing I've learned about this show, and maybe it's unique to this show, But the worse pitch that we make, the more likely it is someone I actively encourage people not to buy the shower curtain, and we've sold 3 now?
Something like that, yes.
Yeah. So, if I tell people that they could attempt to emulate one of there's probably some genuine Tim Pool fans who listen to this show. But one of the more polarizing yet probably harmless internet personalities on the internet. I feel like if I can match that with a product, people will ironically or I don't know, unironically purchase it. Do we have beanies? Speaking of,
we'd have to check. But before we delve too deep into the Threadless store, and of course all older items are available, but the 10-year items are now in stock over at norsecode.threadless.com. It's August 1st, ladies and gentlemen, and you know what that means. Hell League registration is now open. If you DM me over on Twitter or DM me over on Threads, which we are on Threads, believe that one is Norse Code Podcast, just all one word. You can email norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. You can enter the lottery in order to get picked to go into the Hell Leagues. Hell Leagues are available. The only people that were still in the Hell Leagues from last year are the people who won the year, or if you're a former or current employee of Norse Code. So, the Norse Code Leagues are open. Check us out. Sign up over on a DM to me, or go over to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com, and I will add you to the list.
Okay, so I didn't find a beanie. I don't think... Sorry, I talked over you. It was very important. But I didn't find a beanie. Maybe if I keep searching around, I could find a beanie. It just seems like something they would have, right? But I did find something better.
Is it a yarmulke?
That would... Oh, my God. Oh, my God, that would be so cool.
The Norse Code yarmulke coming this fall.
So you can get a 36 by 36, that's 3 feet, by the way, aluminum print of the 10-year anniversary of the Norse Code logo. And because it's on sale, right? It's 30% off of everything that's not a t-shirt, $14 t-shirts. You could get it for only $405.
That you'd be stupid not to buy that, quite frankly.
Yeah. The aluminum is 1/16 of an inch thick. That is incredible. Created with dye sublimation heat transfer onto aluminum. Super crisp colors. Ships with ready-to-hang wire or sawtooth hook on the back. There's multiple ways to mount this 3 foot by 3 foot aluminum print.
I was going to get you a different housewarming gift, but now I know what you need, nay deserve. And it's clearly this.
I'm a little bit worried that a 3 foot by 3 foot print would result in probably an 8-inch body pillow, because it's on the thing. That is concerning now that I think about this.
Well, you're just going to have to deal with it. Before we begin the actual show itself, I just wanted to take a couple quick seconds. At the end of last episode, I had done a little thing where I had given a small little eulogy of sorts, and I repeatedly said you guys don't need to listen to it. And according to the statistics on Spotify, a large number of you did. And judging by the number of messages I received afterwards, a lot of you did, and I really appreciated that. So thank you for that. I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you. This has not been the easiest couple of months, but I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who had reached out and said something. That said, we need to start the show. This is the 10-year anniversary, and you know what shows I really liked when I was growing up? When they'd have like an anniversary show or like a clip show, and they would have people from like guest stars or whatever. They would come on and they'd say something nice about 10 years of blah. Well, we're doing something like that, and we're starting off with Justice.
God.
Hello, dearest Norse Code friends, and also Arif. I'm Justice Mosqueda, by the way. Least valuable guest. Have been let know I've been on the show the most times. I heard that it was your 10th year anniversary. Wanted to celebrate that with you guys and give the Vikings the best wishes, as regression of the mean should kind of bring them down to earth this year. Okay, thanks, bye.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you. All right, so let's get into the silliness. We have a contract to talk about because last episode we spent a good amount of time talking about how Daniil Hunter was holding out, wanted to get a better deal because he had a team-friendly deal. He now has an addition on a 1-year contract. Can you give us some details and what exactly ended up happening here?
Yeah, so obviously, basically everybody who's been following this understands that Daniil Hunter was in a holdout situation minicamp, a hold-in situation at training camp, which is just how you hold out now that the fines are mandatory and non-refundable, and signed a deal. So he was scheduled to make $4.9 million in base salary and $5.5 million total, basically, for the 2023 season. If he had made like all of the like per game roster bonuses and stuff like that. So he had like a $500,000 in total available to him in per game roster bonuses and a $100,000 workout bonus, which the Vikings can elect to give him or not give him. Obviously during a holdout, you can make the argument, but, don't have to worry about that. He signs a $17.5 million deal, which has the ability to go up to $20 million based on incentives. We don't know the entire contract structure yet. I don't believe, as of this recording, it's on Spot Track or on Over the Cap right now. And that is because, there's a lot of things that can happen in a contract. We don't know, for example, if any of those $2.5 or $3 million in bonuses are likely to be earned or unlikely to be earned, which has salary cap implications for this year. So the Vikings entered this negotiation with about $18 million in cap space, and it is entirely possible that they're anywhere between $6 and $12 million in cap space right now, possibly more, but it depends. But there could be void years attached onto the contract that could, change things. There could be, like I said, those incentives that could change things. And your likely or unlikely to be earned incentives are based off of what you did last year. There's an NFLPA approved list of things that can be counted as incentives and not. So, for example, pressures don't count as an incentive, but sacks do. So, for example, if he has a sack escalator, the sacks up to what would be 10 would be counted as a likely to be earned incentive and count against the salary cap. But if it escalates all the way up to 14 or 20 or something like that, those would be considered unlikely to be earned because you didn't get them last year. You can put those in arbitration, but I doubt that matters. There is, a lot of details left to be learned about this contract. It does make him a free agent because it just replaces the 2023 season. It does make him a free agent for 2024. It very much seems like there is an interest in extending him beyond this, right? We don't know if he'll agree to a contract probably through the season or at the end of the season before we hit March. I don't know yet. He did say, I want to be a Viking forever, which is a cool quote. You'll see it in a ton of headlines because it's a great way to lead into an article. But I imagine that, the thing that was holding back a long-term deal would be guarantees, right? Because the Vikings have fairly reasonable injury concerns about Hunter and his availability and his ability to kind of be there for a full season for a number of years at a time. Whereas Hunter, of course, has the exact same concern, but with a different incentive structure, which is, hey, if I'm not available, I still want to be able to get mine. I still want to be able to have a contract that protects me, right? So that's kind of the question there. If he plays a full season, maybe the Vikings will be a little bit more comfortable with that contract. I mean, he played a full season this last year. Maybe more comfortable with the contract structure, maybe a contract structure that is rolling guarantees. I don't know. But it seems like the relationship is not irreparably broken. He and O'Connell have a good relationship. He and Flores, it sounds like they've got a good relationship. The question is, kind of how he feels about the front office. And it very much seemed like, based off of, I think, what was it? Ian Rappaport went on to the Pat McAfee show and talked about these relationships. It very much seems like the relationship between the two was done based off of Rappaport's reporting. But it got mended somewhat quickly. So that's a possibility, right? And it's not lost on me that as soon as this deal gets done, the Vikings immediately host Dalton Risner, who played left guard for the Broncos for the past 4 years. The assistant offensive line coach for the Broncos was Chris Cooper, who is now the offensive line coach for the Vikings. So he's got some experience there. And my guess is, again, it's just a guess. My guess is that the Vikings were either going to call an edge rusher or a guard based off of what happened to Neil Hunter. So if they traded Hunter away, they would have picked up the phone and said, hey, Trey Flowers, you've worked with Brian Flores before, come in. Or, hey, Unique Ngakoue, we like what you can do in this kind of scheme, come in, or whatever, right? It could be possible that was the plan, but when they worked out a plan that kept Hunter here, they instead said, okay, we can focus on the offensive line, we'll bring Dalton Risner in or something like that. So that's my guess. I don't know, but I think the fact that they happened on the same day within hours of each other, I think is probably meaningful. So we'll see about that. But yeah, so that's kind of the next piece of, transactional news, which is technically not a transaction yet. But Dalton Risner visited the Vikings. It sounded like it was a 2-day visit. He left without signing a deal. My understanding is that the Vikings weren't driving too hard, weren't like desperate in terms of, trying to get him onto the roster. But obviously there's interest. Otherwise they wouldn't have hosted him. I wonder if that number is going to matter. Spot Track projected that he'd have an $8 million, a year contract waiting for him in free agency. Obviously that's passed. I think his contract value goes down now that most people have resolved most of their concerns along the offensive line, either through the draft or other free agents. So his leverage might be gone. He might sign for $6.5 million a year. But yeah, so we'll kind of see what number he's looking for and what he expects versus kind of what the Vikings have the ability to offer. Obviously the cap space they have available will not translate 1-to-1 on the average annual salary, just for the reasons that we discussed with the Hunter contract. It's just kind of something that happens. So we'll see. The thing that is interesting to me is I kind of had a read on it a little bit different than I think a lot of Vikings media did. A lot of people had questions. I mean, they asked O'Connell directly, like, hey, this guy's played left guard for 4 years. It sounds like you want to replace Ezra Cleveland. That to me is not the read that I have on it. To me, and I understand that you want to give a second-year guy, more of a chance, but to me, it seems much more like that Ed Ingram's job is a concern. Now, Ed Ingram is under contract for quite a bit longer, right? He signed a rookie deal. Ezra Cleveland is a free agent at the end of the season, so it's possible, right, that you just bench Ezra Cleveland, he has free agency, you're fine. But the reason that I think it's not a concern is he was touted for his versatility entering the draft. He played right tackle at Kansas State for 3 years. He played center for a year. When he trained for the draft, he trained at all 5 offensive line positions. And at the Senior Bowl, he played a little bit of center. I think he ended up in the actual game itself, if I remember correctly, playing right tackle in the game. But I think that he practiced at center, right guard, and right tackle to see what he could do. And obviously he plays left guard for the Broncos. I don't think that the Vikings are really concerned about kind of which side he played in terms of projecting what he's going to do. I think that they're just really comfortable with the idea, if they sign him, really comfortable with the idea of putting him where they need him the most, even if it's center. And I don't think that that's the goal here. But, something to kind of put out there is that center is a possibility. But I do think that probably it's for right guard. I could be very wrong. Again, most people in Minnesota media disagree with me on this one. And I think that that's pretty meaningful too, right? Like it's not the consensus opinion. So there's a pretty good possibility I could be wrong here, but that's my read of it, right? Is that, he played on the right side for a while. So it's not going to be a huge transition to flip sides. It's not like Ezra Cleveland, who played left tackle in high school, left tackle in college, plays right guard for a year in Minnesota, gets blown up, plays left guard, plays a lot better. So that's something to consider, right? I know that Cleveland had some issues in pass protection last year. He was a much better run blocker than he was a pass protector. I still regard him as an average to above average guard. That's me personally again. So we'll kind of see where that goes, but it would mean that the least athletic member of the offensive line, Ed Ingram, would be replaced with another kind of super athlete. So we'll kind of see if that is the goal for the Vikings. I don't know if Ed Ingram gets replaced. I mean, that makes that draft class look like toast, right?
Yeah.
Like Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth and Ed Ingram, like the first 3 picks that you make, good. I mean, Brian Asamoah could be good, but that is a rough class.
Well, it's not like we had watched like the several games of Ed Ingram and thought that this was going well.
Yeah, I mean, they're like the Vikings have said all the things that you'd expect them to say, which is like, yeah, we're really excited for his second year. He's really growing to his own now that the game is slowed down, that kind of stuff, right? they seem confident in him. They sound confident, and then they bring in a guy. So who knows?
It is a bit,
but they're not going to bring him. Sorry to cut you off. They're not going to bring Dalton Risner in here to compete. They say compete, but come on, he's a start. He's going to start. He's not going to sign any contract with anybody that doesn't allow him to start. That would be crazy. He's coming in to start, so he's going to take over somebody's job.
It does seem odd that, well, as you had mentioned, it did seem a little interesting that they ended up bringing in an offensive lineman like the moment that they got the Danielle Hunter thing under control. Like, it seemed a bit odd. Like, of all people, the Vikings are going to attempt to make a splash with offensive line. Really? When's the last time that happened?
Boone. Remember Alex Boone? I mean, Riley Arif kind of, but Alex Boone was the one everyone was like hyped about. Ugh.
I like how I had forgotten about that era even happening for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, he was only there for like, what, a year, 2 years? A year, I think? They just cut him, and you're like, what the heck? What in the world?
Clearly worth the trade. Clearly worth the signing, anyway.
Yeah.
So, we've got all this. The Danielle Hunter thing is, I guess, an interesting point, because we're at an interesting place right now with signing with money for players. And if I can take a moment and talk about what's happening in the running back world right now, it appears that there's some attempt at a second level of unionization, like attempting to at least find out what everybody's being offered. And you've been staunchly against paying running backs for a lot longer than has been cool, I suppose.
Right.
You're the hipster in the sense of in this particular sense. Way before the GMs decided, there might be something to not paying running backs. What exactly is going on with this wealth of talent? And we can say that there's a lot of talent out there at running back that is not being signed and not seeming to be going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, this, like, I ended up getting into like a fight with some people about this in a way I didn't expect. It was like people who were like, this is class trader. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? So the argument is that, like, in a team's best interest, it doesn't make sense to pay running backs, right? And so there's like a lot of things that are at play here. Like, it's just as many factors as you can think of that can depress laborer salary, right? All of them are in play except the fact that like a union exists at all, right? And it's not a particularly strong union. We're aware of that. And that in part, that's their fault, but in part, that's just like the realities of the negotiating environment that they're in, right? There's only one buyer for the product they're selling, labor. So there's a lot of things at play. One, of course, is that there just is like a lot of running back talent. It is the distinction between your elite running backs and your very good running backs is smaller than the distinction between an elite tackle and your good tackles, right? The distinction between a good running back and an average running back, pretty small. Good running back and a replacement level back, pretty small. It does drop off after that. Like, if you've got a bad running back, it's pretty noticeable and it's pretty meaningful and it can impact your team. But beyond, like, aside from that, right, it's not that big in terms of, there's just like a lot of talent entering the league because these people have played running back for a while, because at the lower levels, it does matter a lot. You are putting your more talented players at running back if they've got that capability. And so there is a glut of talent because at lower levels, running the ball is more important because passing is just more difficult at lower levels because it takes a lot to develop a quarterback skill set to be effective in the passing game. There's very few like truly good college passers. There's a lot of truly good college runners, right? And so that's like part of it, is that you've got this pipeline, there's a wealth of talent available, and it's, a lot of people say, yeah, it's simple supply and demand. And in some sense it is. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that. I'll get into that in a second. But there is a ton of supply available, and that reduces the price, right? So that's one element. Another element is that running backs have pretty short lifespans. And it's not just because people are replacing them. It's not a chicken and an egg or a cart before the horse kind of thing. It is that running backs break down. And on their second contract, they tend not to do very well. 2 years ago, I wrote a piece. No, it was last year. For Pro Football Network, where it was just like a week 7 or something recap. And in the middle of it, I went through all of these running back contracts. And I went through, I think it was 17 running back contracts that in the past 7 or so years, 5 or so years, had signed at least 4%. Their average annual value was at least 4% of that year's cap, right? And out of the 17 running backs, 4 of them produced about the value that they had before they signed the contract, and 2 of them produced above the value. And one of them was like Derrick Henry. The other one was Nick Chubb. Notably, it was not Christian McCaffrey. And the reason for that is because he was injured immediately after signing that second contract with the Panthers. So he missed a ton of games for 2 years for the Panthers, which kind of relates to the point I'm getting at. But like one of the 4 that produced the same value after they signed the contract from before was Dalvin Cook. And he just got cut, right? So clearly the Vikings did not get what they needed to out of that contract. And I think we all kind of understand that. That was written halfway through last season, like I said, week 7, right? And so we didn't get the full extent of Dalvin Cook's kind of drop-off for that second contract. That includes players like Ezekiel Elliott, right? So it is really rare for a running back to do that. Now, obviously, Christian McCaffrey is playing well in San Francisco, but the question facing teams like the Carolina Panthers is, if we sign this guy, are we going to get the money's worth that we want out of his potential production? And for the team that signed him to that contract, the answer was no. Christian McCaffrey was injured for basically 2 years at Carolina. He played really well for them, that year that he was traded. Then he gets traded to the 49ers, and actually doesn't play as well as he does in Carolina. Plays pretty well. I think a lot of people said, hey, he was the engine of the team. I think people are overstating his importance, but he did do very well, and I think that he had a real quantifiable impact on the success of that offense, right? But it wasn't as good as the Carolina stuff. So it's actually the 49ers got a less effective back than Carolina did. I think part of that is because Carolina's passing game just wasn't as good as San Francisco. So there's just like a lot less opportunity for Christian McCaffrey to be proportionally important. And also there's like a small sample thing, and it's a half a season for a running back. So that plays a role too, is that running backs kind of die off a little bit earlier in terms of their career prospects. Like a tackle, they can play until they're like 33, right? Quarterback will play until they're 40. Receiver will play until they're 35, right? So like, not quite to the level that they did before, but they last a lot longer. Running backs retiring at age 27, 28. I mean, that's not spread. That's when a wide receiver is about to hit the peak of their career. It's like 28, 29, 27, right? But a running back, most of them are retired by then. So that's part of it, is that you're buying a player that over the lifetime that they can actually negotiate on the market, their market is diminished, because teams negotiate contracts based off of what they expect a player to produce, not over what that player has done. They say it all the time in the NFL, right? Whenever some free agency discussion happens, someone invariably says teams pay you for what you're going to do, not what you've done. It's kind of a cliche, but it makes sense, especially in the context of a running back contract negotiation, which is that you can't expect a running back to produce the way that they did before. So that's reason 2. Reason 3 is that running backs are primarily not responsible for their production in a way that quarterbacks are responsible for theirs or receivers are responsible for theirs, even though those two positions are dependent on each other. A receiver has you can very clearly tell good receivers from bad receivers from year to year and from quarterback to quarterback that they have a lot of value, right? I mean, I feel like Larry Fitzgerald, based off of just the hell of quarterbacks that he went through in Arizona, is really good evidence of that, right? That they can consistently produce really good receivers regardless of the quarterback. Quarterbacks are really, responsible for their production in a large sense too. But running backs just aren't. Like, the offensive line matters for quarterbacks and receivers a lot, but they matter a lot more for running backs. And so rushing production, to the extent that it matters, and that's reason 4, but the rushing production to the extent that it matters is controlled in a large part by how good your blocking is and less by how good your running back is. Now, obviously, I can take a look at, prime Alexander Madison, which that might be this year, but let's say the best version of Alexander Madison we've seen over the past 4 years, or 3 years, no, 4 years. And the best version of Dalvin Cook we've seen over the past couple of years, and say Dalvin Cook is clearly better. There's no question about that. The best Dalvin Cook, way better than the best Alexander Madison. I'm not saying there's no responsibility that the running back plays over their production, and I think that analytics guys tend to overstate that. If you actually talk to team analytics departments, they'll tell you that running backs are much more responsible for their production than the public analytical consensus is. but they are still a lot less responsible than how important your run blocking is. And so if you can choose between a good guard and an elite guard versus a good running back and elite running back, and the money difference is the same, then you choose the guard because they're going to, even though they're 1/5 of the blocking or 1/6, 1/7 of the blocking equation, they're going to have a bigger impact on how successful your run game is. And that's the reason that money is never the same. The difference between a good guard and an elite guard and a good running back and elite running back, the guard is now making more, which didn't used to be the case in the NFL. So that's reason 3. Reason 4 is that rushing is a lot less important than it used to be. Rushing just did not define outcomes nearly as much. It's a game of avoiding negatives, which again is more about blocking than it is about creating positives. Passing just rules. Now, rushing matters. If you put rushing production into a model and try to predict NFL performance, your model improves with the addition of rushing data, right? But it does not improve with the addition of running back data. And so that's like an important part too. So that's like reason 4. And then all of that combines with the rookie salary cap, right? When that was negotiated, it made running backs cheap and available from the draft, as opposed to these really high level running backs that can negotiate these mega contracts on their own right before they hit the peak of their career. So now you've got the rookie salary caps. This is reason 5. And you've got a cost controlled running back that will allow you to get the production that you want. And it might come later in the draft. It might come like as a cream, because again, the drop off from running back, and maybe this is reason 6 in the draft, the drop off from the running back from your first rounder to your second rounder to your third rounder to your fourth rounder is just smaller. It just is, right? And I'm not saying that like you could just pick a guy in the third round and he's going to produce. The first round guy, much higher chance that he's going to produce. And if you don't hit exactly where you want to hit in the first round, you might still end up with like Leonard Fournette, right? Like he wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. He was a starting running back and he deserved to be. But like, in the third round, the Vikings almost drafted Terrence West. The Ravens got him first. Vikings draft Jerick McKinnon instead. And McKinnon turned out to be a much, much better back than Terrence West, right? So like you clearly get misses, right? But like your Kareem Hunts are in your fourth round, Arian Foster's undrafted. And I know that like you can say that for every position, that you're finding, Stephon Diggs in the fifth round, you're finding Tony Romo undrafted. Like that happens, but it happens much more often, quantifiably at running back than any other position. So there's a ton of reasons. And all of those reasons combine with a really unfortunate fact that running backs take a ton of damage. And in fact, they take more damage most of the time than offensive and defensive linemen, which is crazy, right? Because they take damage on every play. Running backs don't. They don't necessarily have to. But running backs have a running start and run right into a nose tackle, right? And so in a sense, if you take a look at, and the CTE data is not good. It just isn't, because it's voluntary submission. It's not random sampling. We don't know. But if you anecdotally take a look at some of the CTE stuff, you'll definitely find offensive, defensive linemen. You'll definitely find quarterbacks. You'll definitely find linebackers. But you find a ton of running backs. So they take on more damage. And that's one reason that they retire earlier than offensive and defensive linemen, despite the fact that literally we call them the trenches, right? But running backs retire sooner, and they face worse health outcomes beyond their NFL career. So you're taking these guys that are playing a really critical role. Like, I don't want to say running the ball is non-critical. It's that running backs are relatively replaceable. And in that sense, now they've turned from replaceable into disposable, because their bodies get used up and you throw them away. So it's a really sad reality, but that is how market structures work. They don't pay you for what sacrifice you're making. They pay you for how much you can help them. And those two things are not the same thing, especially when you can run through it. And this isn't just a running back thing. NFL, anything. If you go through the front office, you take a look at scouting interns, you take a look at the people who help prepare the game, like the people doing game padding, quality control assistants, they run through them and they don't have to pay them. They used to pay them like $25,000 a year. Now it's closer to 40, but my understanding is that on average, the lowest level front office staffer in the NFL still makes less than 40. And they run them for like 60 to 80 hours a week. And most of them quit, and they replace them because everybody wants to work in the NFL. And they replace them with like a new cast of people willing to work for $38,000. So, I mean, mind you, they don't have broken knees by the time they leave the NFL. They just have the scars of an 80-hour work week. plus getting yelled at by a coach. I mean, that sucks. But it's the same thing, is that you become disposable, and then it turns into valuing, this insane work-life balance of the schedule, and you probably drum out a lot of potential talent, but you don't have to pay them. So it happens in a lot of places. It's just right now it's uniquely kind of happening to running backs in a way that depresses their contract value. And that's why Dalvin Cook is still out there. Ezekiel Elliott is still out there. Kareem Hunt, who I just used as an example, a guy you can find in the 4th round, still out there. So
Jonathan Taylor maybe soon.
Yeah, and I'm really curious about that, because he could be that guy that is running between elite and good. He could be kind of like Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry in that, hey, if I'm going to pick a guy in this contract cycle that could turn out in a second contract, it might be him. But then you look at last year, and Jonathan Taylor was just not that productive last year. No one said he wasn't good. No one would say that he wasn't a top 5 NFL back last year. But in terms of production, he wasn't. And that's because the blocking was bad, which tells you he doesn't have as much control over his production as somebody that you'd think is an elite player in the NFL would have. And so I'm curious if he's going to get traded at all. It sounds like he's not going to, but a bunch of people are writing pieces about should my team trade for him or whatever. I haven't seen any Vikings writers do that. So and I think, we're all kind of seems like the Vikings are not into paying running backs right now. But so I think everybody's kind of on the same page that would be unlikely. But it seems like he's unlikely to be traded. But what would he get traded for? And I don't think it'd be for a 1st round pick, even though an elite player at a position that tends to draw a lot of eyeballs, you would think. Maybe it's a 2nd round pick. Maybe it's a 3rd round pick. I have no idea what his value is anymore. So especially when you force a trade or request a trade, your value goes down a little bit when it gets made public. I don't know. But why should a team trade for Jonathan Taylor when they could sign Ezekiel Elliott? I mean, obviously the direct answer is that Taylor's better, but how much better? Is he 2nd round pick better? I don't know. So that's the interesting thing.
It's remarkable to watch whatever is happening over in Indianapolis right now. Whatever they're doing with the Jonathan Taylor situation, it seems like it's managed to press all of the wrong buttons.
Yeah, and people are upset, and I get it. It's and it's interesting because it's no one really talked about this with fullbacks. No one really talked about this with or talks about it with kickers and punters, right? There's something about the fact that the running back position has a lot of charisma to it, and they're recognizable. And importantly, people stash them on their fantasy leagues. I think that's no small part of it. That people are talking about this and not some of these other positions. But it is important to say, hey, centers take on a lot of damage, and I think they're underpaid too. But we talk about running backs because everyone recognizes a running back.
Well, before we get on to talking about training camp, we have another well wishes thing. This one's from Eric Thompson.
Hey, this is Eric Thompson, longtime friend of the show and even a very occasional guest of the show. And I would like to extend my sincere congratulations to Norse Code for making it 10 entire years, which is basically 2 centuries of internet longevity. I'd also like to extend my deepest condolences to the listeners for having to put up with Arif's voice for the past decade. And it just feels like only yesterday that I was driving this random no-name blogger that came from the glitz and glamour of the political and competitive speech realms to Mankato for Vikings training camp. And look at Arif now. He's now a slightly better-known blogger. So to celebrate this momentous occasion, I think I'm going to crack open a certain bottle of wine that commemorates the glorious 28-20 victory of my beloved NDSU Bison over James Madison in January of 2020. Congrats, guys.
Gosh. He had to get that in.
Glorious, Eric.
I mean, props to him. You get the mic, you don't let go. I get it. That's good. It's funny. I mean, Eric has stopped doing this, which I feel kind of sad about. But you used to be like, Arif, why aren't you inviting me onto the show? But totally good natured, by the way. I don't want to cast Eric as somebody who whines a lot because he's not. He's a troop. But it is he would always be like, yeah, you talk about how much you like to get me on the show, and then you never bring me on. And he's right. We got to bring him onto the show more often. It was really funny that he got that dig in. We got him in for that live show, which was a ton of fun.
Oh God, yeah. That was a remarkable amount of fun. And and just for the record, I want to have it be known that I was the one who reached out to Eric. You were not to get him on
I was
the
not.
show.
Well, I mean, like part of it is like you reached out to, like, really key here. James, the producer, did production work.
Yes.
I never give him enough credit. And he reached out to all these people.
Yeah.
I didn't reach out to a single person for this.
No, of course not. That's
I'm the talent. Why would I do work?
Yeah. Wow. I didn't say that. But let's talk
But
about
the talent is an industry term. It's not like me complimenting myself. It's I'm the guy behind the mic. Come on.
I'm not. You're the one who's taking you're the one taking like shelter for a shot that I'm not going to be sending. So
yeah, okay, but it was in your voice. I knew that you were
really
thinking the shot.
We're going to do the old married couple thing now where you're like preemptively thinking we're going to get into an argument.
You didn't say it, but you were thinking it.
And by the rules and standards of the Catholic Church, it happened. All right. No, that's not what we're doing here. We're here to talk about training camp stuff. Let's talk about training camp. Kirk Cousins was wearing a new jersey today. That was kind of cool. But ignoring Kirk Cousins as number 66, what have we learned so far in training camp, and where are we at?
Yeah, so I want to make it like really clear to everybody that I have not been to training camp. So I've not been watching the practices. I don't want to mislead anybody by telling people that I've been at training camp watching the practices. That said, it's not just me reading a bunch of tweets and other people's reports and stuff like that. I've been able to find a way to watch some unique highlights. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And so I've been able to get somewhat of a read on what's happening in training camp beyond just having to read everybody else. So I don't want to mislead people and mention that I've been at training camp. I've not been to training camp once, and there's like a lot of logistical problems that are preventing me from being able to do that every day. So I'll be able to make it out a number of times in the coming days, and I would like to because live practices are always a lot more fun to evaluate. But the things that we're learning in training camp. So unfortunately, there were a number of like injuries today that really we're recording this. Was it Wednesday? Right? Tuesday.
Today is Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday. I know
Yes.
because I have a meeting Wednesday morning and I have not gone to that meeting. So either I missed it or it's not Wednesday. I'm good at this. I'm so good at this.
10 years worth of doing this, yeah.
Yeah, that aspect of my ability to keep track of stuff, that has not changed. So there was a number of injuries today in Tuesday's practice. We'll see how serious they are. It sounds like the Tristan Jackson injury, which occurred today, is the most serious. So he went up for a deep ball. He landed it sounded like on his right leg awkwardly and stayed down on the ground. A number of players came out, and the coach and the trainer came out to see if he could get up, and it sounded like he couldn't, and so he was on the cart, and so he got carted out. So that's already really sad. But on top of that, he was having a really great camp. And so he was showing out. Like among all of the, there's like a whole group of people kind of behind the first and second team that, a lot of times it's undrafted free agents or these guys that have been on the practice squad for a couple of years or like these veteran flyers that signed for like minimum that, the odds of them making the team are generally not very high. But usually like one or two of those guys are exciting enough that they'll get close to making the team and make the practice squad, or they'll just make the team outright, right? And Adam Thielen, of course, is one of them. Everybody knows about him. But, we've seen it like over the years where like, somebody like a Charles Johnson could become a starter, right? And Olabisi Johnson, 7th round guy, ends up becoming a starter. But Jarius Wright, 4th round guy, ends up playing a really critical role in some of these teams, right? And it sounded like Tristan Jackson was really doing a great job of moving himself into the conversation to be a wide receiver 5 or to force the team to consider rostering 6 receivers or even be, potentially wide receiver 4. I doubt it, right? Given how well Jalen Naylor played in minicamp and the day of practice that he had. But, that was something to kind of keep in mind. Now, Blake Prohl, so Tristan Jackson had really good camps for the last couple of years. And so it felt like this could have been a year to really break out. I was kind of more down on him than a couple of other people these last couple of years just because he had problems with his hands, but it sounded like he was catching a lot of the passes that were thrown his way. And so this could have been the year that he like really did a lot. Blake Prohl, who has had kind of the opposite thing where he hasn't been able to participate that much in camp over the past 2 years because of injuries, has also been having a really good camp. And I know that Luke went out there the day that we're recording today, Tuesday, and saw a bunch of good Blake Prohl moments, right? And so he tweeted out about them. But for the past couple of days, Prohl has been doing all right with the second and third team. So that's something to keep in mind. Brandon Powell has, from my understanding, been pretty up and down. Again, the day that we're recording, very up. And he played a fair amount against, in one-on-ones against first-team defenders and playing well. The key to, one thing to keep in mind is we'll see a lot of highlights of one-on-ones, receivers against DBs, running backs against linebackers, and almost always it'll favor the offense, make the offensive player look a lot better. So you have to adjust for that. But even after adjusting for that, Brandon Powell has looked pretty good in some of those drills. But the guy that I'm most excited about has only had one training camp practice is Jalen Nailor. We'll see kind of how bears out how quickly he'll come back. It sounded like he's coming back pretty soon. Vikings don't sound too worried about when they talk about him. I wouldn't be shocked if Jalen Reagor doesn't make the roster. I wouldn't be shocked if Jalen Nailor ends up as the fourth receiver. And Nailor would probably play like an Aldrick Robinson kind of role where he's just like a deep threat that shows up occasionally, stretch the defense, and maybe get 300, 400 yards a year. But if you play it really well, maybe 600, 700. But that's your four, right? Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, Jalen Nailor, probably. And then after that, I don't know. I don't know that Jalen Reagor is going to make the roster. Brandon Powell is also a punt returner, and he seems to be having a better camp as a receiver. Thayer Thomas has looked pretty good. Blake Prohl has looked all right. And so, you've got like some options here. Jordan Addison, it sounds like, has been having, I shouldn't say it sounds like, he is. He's having a good camp. He's getting open pretty quickly, and he's taking advantage of like the skill set that he has that separates him from other receivers without having to worry too much about his weaknesses like his size and stuff like that. And I think, the Vikings won't necessarily have him play like 60 offensive snaps a game or anything like that coming out of the gate, but I think that he'll feature pretty heavily in a rotation between him, Osborne, and potentially a fourth receiver. So you like that. Not a ton of news along the offensive line. Chris Reed, NFI, so we haven't been able to see him. Or not NFI, I think he's PUP. I think Andre Carter is NFI. But we have not been able to see Chris Reed. And so that's moved things around. Brian O'Neill has been rehabbing. He's not on a reserve list, and he was in pads today. I don't think he participated in team drills, but he participated in drills. But he's mostly still rehabbing. And so that means Oli Udoh is the right tackle. Blake Brandel, who is generally speaking the primary backup tackle for the Vikings, he's been playing at guard, maybe because of the Chris Reed injury. Austin Schlottman's also been playing at guard, so maybe it's not because of the Chris Reed injury. Or maybe they just don't have enough guards. And then one guard got injured, and that moved a couple of people around. Schlottman's usually a center, and maybe they're just cross-training these guys to be able to play guard, or maybe they just don't have enough guards. And so Josh Sokol has been playing second-team center because of all of this movement. Vidarian Lowe is the second-team left tackle. I've got the full depth chart available in my most recent camp report. So all of that has like moved some people around. We don't know how good, these players are playing right now, but that's something to kind of keep in mind. The Vikings are already demonstrating that they're willing to go pretty heavy. So we're seeing a lot of Josh Oliver on the field at the same time as TJ Hawkinson, as we expected. Johnny Munt's been rotating in a fair amount as well. We're probably going to see those three a lot over the course of the season. We don't know, if Nick Muse or Ben Sims or Colin Thompson. I think probably Nick Muse is going to be the fourth tight end, but I would expect it given how often they want to use tight ends. Kirk Cousins is having a very good camp. Today was not as good, but he's been having a very good camp. I think he probably looks sharper than he usually does, which is nice. I mean, he's not usually outstanding in one way or the other, but he's looked pretty sharp. Jaron Hall is mostly having a bad camp. He had one good day. Nick Mullins, he was absent the other day, but he's playing today. He looks better than Jaron Hall. So that's what we're getting out of that. Running backs, a couple injuries there. Kenny Nwangwu hasn't been here today, or I think he was missing yesterday as well. Alexander Madison, late in practice, came up limping. And so we saw a lot of Ty Chandler and Dwayne McBride. Dwayne McBride did rotate in with the first team a little bit. So that's kind of interesting. We'll see about that. Defensively, there's been a lot of defensive rotation, but it sounds like your starting defensive tackles might actually be Khyiris Tonga and Harrison Phillips, which raises questions about whether or not Dean Lowry is as good as kind of we're hoping that he'll be. But he is rotating in with the first team in 2 defensive tackle sets, and in 3 defensive tackle sets, he's there. He's on the first team. But we've seen Jocullen Roy rotate in. We've seen James Lynch even rotate in a little bit. Jonathan Bullard, Asese Ademewo. They've all rotated in a little bit, but mostly that second team is like Bullard and Roy and a little bit of Ademewo. We've seen kind of some movement there. The linebackers and unfortunately we haven't seen Andre Carter because he's been, like I said, on a reserve list. But edge rusher, Daniil Hunter just came back, so he didn't participate in team drills today. But we're going to expect him to be a big part of it. Marcus Davenport was missing. Maybe it's injury related in today's practice. So we saw the starting unit of DJ Wanham and Pat Jones. Hopefully that's not how that goes. Andre Carter, like I said, is on a reserve list. And so behind them, you've got like Luigi Villain is probably the only guy that's been rotating in with the first or second team on a regular basis. And so that's probably your depth. I don't think Benton Whitley or Curtis Weaver are going to make the roster. But those are your edge rushers. And when Hunter's back and Davenport is fully back and all of that, that's going to look a little bit better. Linebacker, the most exciting thing is that Ivan Pace, the undrafted free agent, is on the second team right next to Troy Dye. I expected that to actually be Troy Reeder, but Dye is seemingly out competing. And that's interesting because Reeder and Dye were the second team linebackers in camp. Jordan Hicks, Brian Asamoah, as you'd expect, are the starters. Not a ton to report there because it's hard to report on linebackers in camp. Cornerback is interesting. So Mekhi Blackman had just rotated in with the ones today, primarily played with the ones today. Yesterday played with the twos, except in red zone drills, he played with the ones. And the guy ahead of him in the previous days was not Andrew Booth, as many people might have expected, but actually Jawan Williams, with Byron Murphy kicking inside when Jawan Williams is the starter and playing outside when Mekhi Blackman is there because Mekhi Blackman's playing the slot. And then Caleb Evans is just like kind of locked in as being the other starter. So I think that tells us a lot about Andrew Booth, right? I think that it tells us that, there's some concerns there. Jay Ward they asked today about Jay Ward's position because in college he played outside corner, inside corner, and safety. And so, the Vikings during the draft didn't tell us exactly what he'd be. I think we got the impression that he'd be a safety. The Vikings, if you ask them now, they still are like, we don't know. But he's been practicing with the safeties. And it sounds like he's also meeting with the safeties in the safety room. And so I'm going to say that he's a safety, right? So that's probably it for that cornerback group in terms of this discussion. I've not seen a ton from cornerbacks in terms of Tay Gowan, Kalen Barnes, CJ Colden, Najee Thompson, Jalen Williams. I know Jalen Williams has been playing second team nickel. So that's something to keep in mind. Luke tweeted out a lot today about Tay Gowan, but it seemed like mostly special team stuff. So something to keep in mind. At safety, that's kind of one of the more interesting questions as well. Lewis Cine is just not with the ones. He just isn't. Cameron Bynum is starting opposite Harrison Smith. That just really hasn't changed. Harrison Smith did miss some time with in minicamp. Personal issue, Veterans Day, I don't know. It didn't sound like it was injury related, though. And you did have Lewis Cine play. So that's something to keep in mind. But when the Vikings are in dime or when they're in big safety nickel or big nickel, which is a safety instead of a cornerback, it's Josh Metellus out there and maybe eventually Jay Ward, right? But it is not Lewis Cine. And so the Vikings don't seem to put a lot into, the idea that he's a versatile dime backer. They kind of only see him as a pure safety at the moment. That could change. And it sounds like he's the third safety, maybe. I don't know. But I don't think that he's going to start. He had a pretty good day yesterday. He had this highlight that had everyone revved up. It made it through socials. The Vikings apparently showed this highlight to the rest of the team. Everyone celebrated it. Huge moment for him. I don't want to take it away from him. And it was a genuinely insane highlight. It's exactly kind of the best stuff you saw from him in Georgia. He's playing center field, understands that Nick Mullins wants to throw to the flat, gets there before Nick Mullins even turns his eyes in that direction, and knows that that throw is going to the flat. And so he starts before Nick Mullins, even looks to see if that's an option. And he drives all the way down, trusts his instincts, which I think is crazy important, and intercepts the pass, even though he'd originally played from the center field position. So it looks like he's traveling at the speed of light. Honestly, what's happening is he understood what the play was before the play began to get really executed, and he reacts first. And the thing that really bothered me in camp about Lewis Cine was that it did not seem he was trusting his instincts. And so that's the thing, right? If that was what was holding him back with the Vikings last year, why he didn't get to outcompete Cameron Bynum for the first 4 weeks of the season before he got injured, it might have been that he was too slow to kind of trust his cues. And that is a moment where it looks like he trusted his cues and acted on them. And any defensive coach will tell you, like, you got to play fast. First and foremost, you got to play fast. If you're making mistakes, make them fast, right? If you make the right decision at the wrong time, that's worse than making the wrong decision at the right time. That's what defensive coaches will always tell you. Offensive coaches too, but more defensive coaches, right? And it seems like he's now acting on that really quick trigger. So that's really nice. We'll see if that turns into anything. That's probably not the only thing that held him back in terms of being able to earn a starting job or rotate in. I wonder if it took some time to learn all of the other elements of the defense. I don't know. Again, from what it sounded like at Georgia, it sounded like he was a super smart guy, was kind of the quarterback of that defense. You know, that Georgia defense was nuts. And so being kind of the guy that can lead that defense around, it's probably really meaningful, I think. So we'll see. But like the way that he has showed up in camp the past year, or had showed up in camp last year, was kind of really opposite my understanding of who he was as a player coming in. So we'll see if he's kind of recovered that. I don't know. But for the most part, very much it looks like Cameron Bynum, Harrison Smith, and that's it. And the really cool thing is, so I just talked about the players individually. Schematically, we're seeing and I talked a little bit about the offense, but schematically in defense, we're seeing tons of blitzes. Today, Harrison Smith, according to Alec Lewis, had like at least 3 sacks today. They're blitzing him a lot. We saw Bynum blitz. We saw Metellus blitz. We saw Scene blitz. They're blitzing a lot from the safety position, but they've also blitzed from the quarter position. They've obviously blitzed from linebacker. There's just a ton of movement defensively. They're playing kind of this loose sort of defense where it's not like they don't know what they're doing, but it looks like you have no idea what's going on. So that's really cool that they're playing a much more dynamic and active defense. And so that might be what we see. There's a lot more man coverage we're seeing this year in camp than we did last year. And I think that's going to play out. So I think we're going to get kind of that aggressive defense that we wanted. Again, if you talk to people in Miami, they got sick of how aggressive that defense was. They didn't like it. Everyone kind of remembers that people accused Miami of taking because they called cover 0 in the final play against the Jets. It's something to keep in mind. It could be too aggressive, but right now it's a pretty refreshing change.
So before we move on, I think it's worth mentioning the weirdness of the Jordan Addison thing. Is this completely settled? What's happening? Like, he was driving way too damn fast and had a dog in it. It feels like there was a lot of everyone kind of forgave him when it turned out it was for a dog. Like this was like a Marley and Me moment or something.
Yeah, I thought everything about this was like very weird, right? Because people were talking about it initially as if, I mean, the way some people were talking about it was even worse than the way people talk about like players who get Deweys, right? Like when, who was it? The safety, Jaron Kearse. When Jaron Kearse got a Dewey during the bye week, a bunch of people were like upset. They were really annoyed. I don't remember a lot of people being like apoplectic, right? Like just beyond angry, like furious, right? I don't remember a lot of that. If they were, I would have understood, but like, I don't recall that being a primary reaction. And it was the bye week. There was just not a ton of other news going on at the time for the Vikings. And so it was kind of part of the news cycle in a reasonably large way. He's like a 7th round pick. He was active on special teams, rotated in a couple of times because Zimmer liked to use him as like a kind of a dime linebacker at times. So it's not as if he was, but he wasn't like Harrison Smith, right? But it was kind of weird. And then we get this news that completely sober that Jordan Addison drove 140 miles per hour on a 55 mile per hour highway, which, the speed limit technically on 94 is 55. I would not characterize the going speed on 94 is 55. I don't think anybody drives 55 and 94 until it's backed up, in which case no one's driving over 10. But, sure, 140 and a 55. It's not as if he was doing 140 and a 65 that people would have modulated the reactions any differently. So I'm kind of splitting hairs there. But it was at 3 a.m., so there's not really an environmental speed to go off of anyway. Clearly he wasn't going with the flow of traffic. But, he told the police officers at the time that he was doing it because he had a sick dog. My understanding of this, and this is me being kind of like hedgy, and I don't have sources in a way that I'd be willing to like report it. But my understanding of that's probably true. He told Kevin O'Connell this, and then he didn't tell the media this, which to me, either the Vikings PR staff or his own agent Maybe could have done a better job there, because the dog story is like really relatable, and people, as soon as the dog detail from the police report came out, people were a lot more forgiving, and a lot of people were like, I would have done the same. A couple of people were like, well, absolutely don't do that, but I get it now. And when you hear that he's like in a Lamborghini, and he's in a Lamborghini SUV, but you know, it's not like a Diablo or anything like that. Do they still make Diablos? What's the fastest Lamborghini now? I don't need to know. I was about to look it up, and I was like, nah, not worth it. But he's in a Lamborghini SUV. Obviously, it's a sport utility vehicle, but it's a sport SUV, a sport utility vehicle, if you will. It's meant to go fast more than be an SUV. Not that SUVs are really primarily used as utility vehicles anyway. It's meant to go fast, right? So it's not the same thing. But he's going 140. And a lot of people just kind of assume, based off of the fact that this is a car designed to go fast, bought by people who love to go fast, assumed it was a joyride. And you know what? Fair assumption, right? Like, you're always going to go through life making assumptions because you can't question every single assumption that you have. That's just how humans operate. There's just too many things happening at once for you to be able to investigate every assumption you have to full detail. And it turns out this assumption happened to be wrong. I think it's a fair assumption, but I thought that the way people reacted to it was really bizarre, because people were telling the Vikings, like tweeting at the Vikings, telling them in Instagram comments, telling them like on their TikTok page that they just got to cut him. Right, going to unrelated TikToks and saying, "Hey, you got to cut this Jordan Addison guy." Obviously, saw most of it on Twitter, but it was like really crazy the amount of reaction that I had to it, and I was like, maybe this was my mistake, but I tweeted out like, "This is kind of weird," right? That people got this active in their reactions to this guy. Again, he's going 140. That is a crazy speed, but to cut the guy, to talk about this guy's like moral character, this fiber, to say that even if the Vikings don't cut him, his career in the NFL is doomed because you can just tell that he's just not a good guy. That's wild to me. That's crazy.
There were so many overreaction takes from every side of this, and it almost seemed like the backlash to that with the dog stuff it made it even seem like more ridiculous to me.
Right, because like it, to me, that kind of tells me that you probably didn't think it was that bad. Right? Like, if you're like, oh, well, if there's a reason. Like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Oh, it's for a dog. Everybody loves dogs. Like, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, I was talking to an agent the other day, and in a while back, and he was talking about, like, recruiting college players. And he talked about, like, sometimes it's really weird. And I'm definitely not going to name the agent or any of the players involved. And he was speaking in a hypothetical anyway. But he said sometimes it's really weird because you'll get referred a player, right? And in that referral, they may or may not tell you about this player's background. By the way, you got to do the background research. And you end up, because of the way that, everyone else reacts, you end up getting more upset if you learn that a player has some history involving animal abuse or something like that than human abuse or child abuse, right? Not just like abusing like your partner, but like your children, right? People get like more upset about that. And there's like, and people, this is not like a novel observation, right? Like people have talked about this for probably decades, but at least for years I've seen it where people are like, man, people react a lot more to that dog than that kid, right? But it is like strange. It's at least worth like thinking about like how much people, and this is the opposite of that. Now it's in favor, like, and I'm not saying that if he was like, yeah, my kid is sick, people would have been like, well, that's not a dog. I'm not saying that, but it just seems like there's like some element to it being a dog that has made the snap back from that reaction like really weirdly intense. People compared it to Henry Ruggs. I've said multiple times that doesn't make sense. Henry Ruggs. So here's an important thing. The cameras that we have available to us, there was nobody else on that road. Which is a lot different than what Henry Ruggs did at 160 miles per hour, drunk, like super drunk, by the way, not just like 0.09 or something like that, but like 0.161 when he was tested 2 hours later. So he's probably even more drunk than that, right? On a crowded road, the Vegas Strip, by the way, which has stops, right? Like there's stoplights on the strip, right? And a ton of cars are on it at all times, right? And he was drunk, and he had a passenger in his car. And he was going much faster. He was going 160. And people compare the two, and it's not the same. And Adam Harstad, who is I think one of the best thinkers in the football space, or maybe just a really good thinker in general, pointed out to me like, well, there's got to be some kind of like, I don't know where that line is, but like, drunk driving at 60 miles per hour is probably less dangerous than sober driving at 140. And I didn't really want to get into that. I was like, I don't know. You're like, this is like an interesting kind of thought experiment. And, maybe it's a little bit weird that we are more upset about drunk driving at 60 than we are about sober driving at 140, generally speaking, as a society, because of like the symbolism of drunk driving and how we've talked about it so much. Maybe, I don't know, but I don't kind of want to entertain it too much, because like the problem with drunk driving is not that it makes you make a decision to go fast, right? The problem with drunk driving is that every millisecond that you have of driving is made worse because you don't have reaction time. And on the football party, or judgment, right? It's both judgment and reaction time. But on the football party, Sam Ekstrom brought up the calculator that tells you how long it'll take you to stop at a certain speed, right? And so moving, basically to simulate moving your foot from the accelerator to the brake, right? And how long it takes, right? And if it takes you 1 second to stop, you will have driven 3 football fields. Now, generally speaking, human reaction time from accelerator to brake is actually faster than a second. So it's not really, but it's an important thing to demonstrate, because for drunk driving, that time is longer. So that distance to stop is much, much longer. And that's true for every decision you make, whether it's to avoid an obstacle in the road, or to change lanes, or to determine that there's a pedestrian, or any number of things. You take much longer to react, and you just don't have good judgment. Things that seem far away might actually be closer because you're drunk, right? Or, it's always kind of difficult, especially in the dark, because this is at 3 a.m., which magnifies the risk. It's always difficult to tell the difference between an adult up close and a child far away. But that is actually legitimately, and we have like studies on this, and I don't think it surprises anybody, much more difficult to make the distinction between an adult that is far away and a child that's close up when you're drunk. That's just the case, right? You're less likely to see stop signs. You're less likely to see cars. Like, it's just like all of these things magnify the risk substantially more. And he drove fast on a relatively empty road. I know some people are like, well, then how was the cop there? And it's like, well, the cop's on a speed trap. He's not on the road. But, whatever, right? He shouldn't have been driving that fast. It's upsetting. People die because of speeding. Fairly frequently. Car accidents are like the number one cause of preventable death, I think, in the United States. Like, cigarettes are getting lapped by cars now, which didn't used to be the case. So, super important that he not do that, right? Super okay to judge him for that. Weird amount of moralizing over it.
It felt weird from every angle.
Yeah.
From the jumping on it to the dog to the speeding, it was weird. Well, let's talk a little bit about the television show on Netflix. Let's talk about QB a little bit, because this did feature heavily Kirk Cousins in a very edited, presented for you specifically by but it felt like the Cousins camp. It was curated. The biggest news out of this was that Kirk Cousins apparently had a serious rib injury last season. Otherwise, did we learn anything truly interesting about him besides the fact that his wife picks out his clothes?
I mean, we already knew that. He told us that 2 years ago. Yeah. So even that, yeah. In terms of like facts about Kirk Cousins or his play, I don't think we learned a lot aside from that rib injury, which I think was really revealing, right? Like, I thought the amount of pain that he was in, the amount that he was playing through, is like a really important piece of context to have about evaluating that season and about the kind of player that he is kind of generally. I think we always kind of understood him to be a pretty tough, gritty player that played through a lot of pain, generally speaking, but to have it kind of put so viscerally in front of us, it's like undeniably kind of what was happening. And it very much seemed like he had re-injured it too. So it sounded like, based off of the way Netflix edited it, and also I kind of rewatched the Washington game, that the rib injury was a product of the Daron Payne hit, right? And which, I mean, it was almost a touchdown. He thought it was. He would have gotten up sooner, he says. I don't think he would have, because broke a rib, right? Or fractured a rib. But yeah, he was suffering through a lot of pain. And then I think it was either next week, maybe, or the week after, it was the Buffalo game, and he re-injured it, it sounded like, or it seemed like. He didn't show up on the injury report, which is not a violation, by the way. Mike Florio always gets really upset about this, but he didn't show up on the injury report until very, very late in the season for, I think, a rib-related, maybe not. 2 years ago, he showed up on the injury report for like a rib-related reason, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, Kirk Cousins on the injury report. That hasn't happened since ever." And he's been a starting quarterback for like 7 years, right? But yeah, the reason it's not a problem for him not to be in the injury report from like a reporting perspective is that you only need to report if a player's practice is altered in any way. So he's a full participant in every practice. You don't got to talk about the injury. That's just the case, right? You can go to the training room, but players always go to the training room all the time because every player is hurt, right? It's just not every player is injured. And the hurt can be really substantial. It would be something that would put me in the hospital, but they would play. They would go through 60 car crashes, which is what an NFL game is. No problem. Or I shouldn't say no problem, but essentially no complaints, right? And it's like, hey, my everything is bruised and I'm going to need to sit out for a little bit because of it, and they're going to go into the training room. So you don't put people on the injury report for, seeking treatment in the training room. It's only if their practices are in any way altered. It's I'm not going to say it's like really good or anything like that. I don't think it's as good as Hard Knocks or All In or whatever they want to call the Hard Knocks version of the regular season stuff. That I think is really incredible stuff. And that nowadays is much more highly managed than it used to be. At least for Hard Knocks. But it's good. It's entertaining. I think that it humanizes Kirk Cousins in a way that I think is really fascinating. But it's PR, right? It's really well executed PR. So the day of Patrick's show, Kirk Cousins said that he got final say. Him and his team had final say over anything that would air. So if there's any footage that they wanted out, was out. And so they had a lot of control over it. Also kind of funny, Joe Burrow said that he was not going to be on quarterback. He said he turned it down. We're mostly hearing about quarterbacks that have turned it down. And Peter King, for like a couple of hours on his Monday morning quarterback piece, had one line in there where he said that Joe Burrow would be on quarterback. And that we'd get to see it or something. We never get behind the scenes for Joe Burrow. He is shy from the media, so we'll finally get a chance when he's on quarterback. And then a couple hours later, that line gets deleted from the thing. But Burrow outright denied it, so I don't. It's kind of weird. We'll see. But yeah, I think it's worth watching. It's not like journalistically all that interesting in terms of like news or things that we learn.
Yeah,
but you get a peek into Cousins' life, which I think is kind of cool.
I was watching it on a flight back, and I just sat and went, I feel like I already knew most of this, other than like the injury, which ended up raising the question of, why wasn't this revealed? How did this, say remain a secret? But how exactly did this come to be? All that. So it was kind of interesting on that. However, before we get to the next thing, we do have another well-wisher of sorts. So we're just going to play this right here.
Oh, no.
Hey, guys. It's Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings. Wow. 10 years of Norse Code. That's an incredible accomplishment. And I got to say, as a longtime listener myself, I don't think that I would be in this were it not for Norse Code. I think it's truly fair to say that
he knows that
James
hurts.
And Dusty, rest his soul, created Luke Braun in the public Vikings space. I wouldn't really be here were it not for you guys. So thank you for creating me and congratulations on 10 years.
This guy, he found the most hurtful thing to say, and he knows it. That was perfectly executed. God. Hats off, Luke.
Thank you, Luke. So before we get to the mailbag, Secret Base came out with an announcement a couple of weeks ago, and then tonight was the reveal of episode 1 for the history of the Minnesota Vikings. And in case you did not watch the fantastic several-part series going over every nuance of the Falcons.
Or the Mariners. That one was good too.
Or the Mariners, yep. This is absolutely worth your time. Episode 1, I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, it was really good. I think it's going to ramp up in episode like 4 or 5 because, that's what happened with the Falcons. It just got really good then. But every part of each one of these documentaries is just so good. And if you haven't watched a John Boyce video, I don't care. Stop listening to this. Watch any John Boyce video. They're so good. Some of them have gotten taken down, including, some of my favorites, like Why Do I Play This Stupid Game? It's one about poker that's no longer available, which is unfortunate. Which means, a reminder, that these things can be taken off at any time. Go watch The Dumbest Boy in the World, or whatever it's called. That one is amazing, right? Or all of the ones, just like, all of these, good stories, right? I think, was that the name of the series? Like, These Are Good Stories or something like that?
It was
the one
like that,
on... Yeah, the one on the knuckleball pitcher, great. The one on the guy that tried to prove that the Earth was flat by using balloons attached to a chair, fantastic. The pigeon-toed base stealer, phenomenal. All of these are so good. I highly recommend watching them. I also recommend, if you've got about 6 hours, to watch the Atlanta Falcons one. It's so good. It's incredible entertainment. There is no better sports content, including the content that I produce, out there than what John Boyce does. Nothing. You could read an amazing Ted Wynn scheme breakdown article, and you'll enjoy it. I promise you will. But you will. I'm sorry, Ted. You will enjoy the John Boyce stuff more. It is so good.
It is so thorough. It is so remarkable that the side views of things that they try to take you on. They discuss in this particular episode. They go very in on Bud Grant. They go
Bud Grant stories I'd never heard of, like including basically an origin story for Bud Grant that was just, I'm not going to spoil it, was just eye opening. It was incredible.
Yeah. It was absolutely phenomenal to sit and watch a number of these, and they end up going kind of like not play by play, but they end up going. They start out
blow by blow, let's say.
Yeah, blow by blow. They start out discussing the greatest comeback in NFL history and just how remarkably improbable it was, and they just go from there. And the whole it focuses on the very early days of the team, but it still relates back to where you're at now. So it's so smart. It's so good.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. It's so smart because they do a really great job of extracting these stories. Because you can imagine like the number of stories that you read now, right? But you can imagine that there's like hundreds of stories about any particular era of the Vikings or even a year of the Vikings that you could extract and pull out and read. And they do such a good job of choosing the stories that are both incredibly interesting and really memorable, as well as representative of kind of the larger story that they're telling about this moment of the franchise, right? People will use the word narrative a lot to talk about, like, I don't like this narrative that's being pushed by the media, right? Narrative is adopted this like second or third meaning where it's about a lie or a pitch that someone's selling. But the original meaning of the narrative, which is a story that's being told, they do such a strong job of establishing a narrative about the team that is easy to follow and memorable and accurate in terms of like spiritually, essentially it's true. Obviously it's accurate in terms of what they're saying, but like in terms of getting at the feeling of the moment, really incredible stuff, told in such an accessible way. Most of John Boyce's fans, from my understanding, do not follow sports. Like, that's how good this is. And I'm gonna drop a rare compliment for Luke Braun. I don't tend to do this. Luke Braun did a really excellent, I think it was also 7 parts, thing on the history of the Minnesota Vikings, which I think is available for free, but it was released as part of like a Patreon thing. I don't remember.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And it's really good. And he was inspired, not by us. I'm not going to take that. That's not me, but by John Boyce to produce this. And it's really well done. Sorry, Luke, you're not living up to John, though. The John stuff is great. Luke's is more detailed. I'm going to guess it's going to continue to be more detailed and have like a lot more in terms of specifics, but he also does the same kind of, he's got this narrative track that he's going on that is kind of not ancillary, but kind of tangential to the thing. And then he loops it back around. It's very similar style. But I mean, John Boyce is the OG, and it's really incredible stuff. And, Luke and I have both been wanting this for a long time. A couple of years ago, and I don't know if this tweet will end up showing up in the show. I think it showed up in the trailer, where he dropped the Falcons one. And anyone who's vaguely familiar with the history of the Atlanta Falcons knows how sorry of a franchise it's been, how pathetic it's been to watch the Falcons do what they do. This is, I think any Falcons fan would tell you, I am not really insulting the team by saying these things.
No, when you have a coach that actively tries to fight sports writers, you've got a winner on your hands.
Right, exactly. And so someone asked him after he dropped the Falcons thing, like, are you ever going to do the Vikings? And he goes, no, it's too sad. Can you imagine going through the history of the Atlanta Falcons franchise and being like, the Vikings are too sad? Well, he did it. He did the Vikings. And I think it's one a week until the last week, in which case I think it's two in the last week. But it's great. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, it is absolutely phenomenal.
And then watch all the other John Boy stuff.
Yeah, it's quite good. So before we go into the mailbag, which we are about to go in now, I appear to have two messages here for some reason. Let me play this first one and see where we're at.
For some reason, you know what you're doing.
See if this goes.
Hey there, this is Dropplate Dave. Big congrats on making it to a full 10 years of Norse Code, even though we both know my first appearance 3 years ago saved the show, and you've been living off the merch you made for my artwork ever since.
That's true. That's true. He's right.
There was something else here. I'm trying to figure out why this is here. Let's see. Maybe.
Hi there, this is Otaku Manufacturing calling on behalf of Dropplay Dave, letting you know that your full order of 1,000 body pillows, two-sided, done with, quote, Arif's full frontal anime waifu form is complete, and it will be shipped to your address shortly. Thank you.
Oh, good. I was wondering when that order was going to get here. Awesome.
Great. I'm sure that wasn't like a production error or anything like that. I'm sure if it just makes the show, like, oops.
I don't know what to tell you, but we're going to go into the mailbag now, and we got a couple of Vikings questions, a couple of NFL questions, and then it's more of a celebration of silliness about the show. So to open up, Cody B. Sharif asks, for Arif's safeties not named Trey Lance corner, second-year safety Lewis Seen has been a hot topic on Vikings Twitter. Has he stood out to you at training camp? If so, how has he improved specifically?
So the trusting his eyes thing, I think, is the way that he's improved. I will say that the last couple of days of Lewis Seen have been a lot more interesting than the first couple of days. I don't think he stood out to me the first couple of days. It's really difficult to get a handle on safeties in training camp. Like, even when you have access to, hypothetically speaking, top-down footage, it is really difficult. Just to get an understanding of what the safety is being asked to do. And most times safeties won't be tasked with any particular job. And so it is really difficult to tell. But I will say he did not particularly stand out the first couple of days. These last couple of days have been great. And I think it's just he might have flipped a switch. He's figured out confidence, or he's figured out kind of like this is the thing that he needs to do and it's up to his game. But I still don't think that he is going to crack the starting roster until we see a little bit more than what we've seen so far.
Next question that we have is also from Cody B. Sharif. He says, also, for Arif's running back 2 competition corner, do you have any inclination on if one of Ty Chandler, Kenny Wangwu, or Dwayne McBride has the upper hand in the running back 2 competition?
Yeah, upper hand's the best way to put it, because I don't think anyone's like straight out won it or anything like that. And the injuries today have complicated that question a little bit. But I will say that the primary rotation for the second running back has been given to Kene. We haven't seen it. I expected more Ty Chandler with the running back 2 stuff. Now Kene has been gone, and so we've seen Ty Chandler step up. But they also gave Dwayne McBride a lot of the running back 2, and even occasionally rotating with the running back 1s because of Alexander Madison's injury. And so it seems like McBride actually does have pretty genuine chance of competing for running back 3 or running back 2 status. But right now, I think it's Kene's job to lose. I think he'd have to improve pretty substantially as a running back to really kind of outright win it by the time that like the preseason is over. It wouldn't surprise me if Ty Chandler overtook him, and it might just be kind of like a perfunctory thing where, it's more likely that Ty Chandler wins it. But right now, it's Kene's job. But I would say, yeah, upper hand is the best way to describe it. It's certainly not locked in. Certainly, I would expect that the Vikings are going to rotate in Ty Chandler and maybe Dwayne McBride in that running back 2 spot to just see if it works out.
Zach asks a question a number of us were curious about. Says, so what is actually going on with the Aaron Rodgers contract? People don't actually just give up $35 million, do they?
I mean, people might. Rodgers didn't, which is not like an aspersion. There's enough legitimate criticisms of Rodgers for the he didn't actually give up $35 million criticism to be a real criticism, right? But Rodgers was slated to be guaranteed over $100 million, I think like $112 million, something like that, in terms of guaranteed money on his on-paper contract entering training camp. The contract was renegotiated so that the total of the contract is $112 million, $112.5, but the guarantee drops to $75 million. Okay. Then, so he gives up, quote unquote, $35 million in guaranteed money, as opposed to the, I think, $140 plus million in unguaranteed, or $112 million in guaranteed money that he would have made. Right. And so a lot of people are saying, hey, Rodgers gave up $35 million. Well, not quite. There's two things at play here. The first one's pretty easy. If this were the case, and it's not, I'll explain that. He gave up 35 in guaranteed, not in total. He had more kind of on the books headed his way. The second thing is his contract structure with the Packers was incredibly complicated, and it makes statements like these stand out. And I wish I could understand all of it to get a better explanation out there. There is an explainer at Over the Cap from when he signed the extension with the Packers. It has rolling guarantees and roster bonuses and stuff like that. And it is like a hefty beast to kind of fully understand. But he restructured his contract after the 2022 season to make a trade a lot easier for a hypothetical team, in this case, the Jets. The Jets were up against the salary cap, and so they could not even afford a $16 million cap hit. It just wasn't available for them. And so he needed to restructure his contract. He did. So Rodgers had a bonus coming in 2023 that I think guaranteed in 2022. It's one of those rolling guarantees where if you're on the roster 1 year, your next year's salary gets guaranteed. So that made it really difficult to avoid kind of the dead cap that was happening. If you convert it into signing bonus, you still end up having a lot of money against the cap that year because the signing bonus gets split over 5 years. And so you're still taking 1/5 of that, which was not going to be tenable for the Jets based on their salary cap situation when they were going to or scheduled to take Rodgers on. So they moved it to 2024. So he ends up having a 2023 roster bonus that pays him out about $40 million and a 2022 roster bonus that pays him out $45 million. And those both get moved into 2024. Plus his base salary for 2024. So his base salary in 2023 was like $1 million, $1.5 million. I think it was veteran minimum. And then he had a workout bonus, $50,000, something like that, and a signing bonus, which, that was prorated out. It had already been paid. You can't move that. And so I think his cap hit was something like, and that's what it is right now, something like, $8 million in the first year, right? Pretty low cap hit. But his cap hit in 2024 was going to be $100+ million. So in April, it got negotiated again, and coming out, and they renegotiated it, and they agreed to a new deal. Coming out of it, it was reported that it would be renegotiated once more before or during training camp. Ideally before, was how the reporting was. And so it got reduced to him having a cap hit based on the negotiations. I think they moved some things into void because they didn't add, because he was always going to be under contract till 2025. I think they moved some things into void to make it such that his cap hit was only $75 million in 2024 only, right? Well, that wasn't going to fly, right? There's no way the Jets would be able to absorb that. So it was always going to be renegotiated. And I can't report this, but when Rodgers agreed to be traded to the Jets, my understanding is that the understanding between him and the Jets was that he wasn't going to hold them accountable for all of the guaranteed money that the Packers had guaranteed in their original contract towards him. And that was kind of probably, I should say probably, because I can't report it because I don't have sources on this one. Legitimately, I don't. I'm not doing a fake, I can't confirm it, but I know. I don't know. But my understanding is that in order to be traded to the Jets, he had to agree to not hold them accountable. Again, speculation, that he would hold them accountable for all the guaranteed money. So the agreement that, from what I can pick up, the agreement that he had agreed to with the Jets, not put in writing, was that he was never going to have $100+ million guaranteed. They traded for him with the understanding that would be the case. And so when the details come out, he never get, because he just wasn't going to retire if he wasn't going to get traded. he never gave up $35 million because it wasn't on the table. Now, technically, after trading, because he was not legally obligated to give up any of that money. Technically, he could have put the Spurs to the Jets and said, hey, actually, now that all of this hullabaloo is done, now I'm officially a Jet, I'm going to hold you to the $100+ million guaranteed I have. He could have done that, right? The Jets would have no recourse. It wouldn't hold up in court, right? So, and then he didn't. But I don't think he gets credit for that. He just basically agreed to it. So, Peter King asks him like, wow, you don't see people giving up guaranteed money like this, which you do, right? I mean, we saw Tom Brady give it up. And in a way, Patrick Mahomes kind of is. He's like, wow, you never see it. Like, wow. And then Rodgers is like, I just want to make sure that I build the best team around me. Like, what better way to endear yourself to a fan base than to say, I'm not here for money, I'm here to win. Mind you, I'm not here for money. I just got $75 million guaranteed at signing. But like, I'm not here for a lot of money. I'm here to win. Everybody loves athletes who care more about winning than money. And so that's what he cast himself as. So yeah, his cash flow over before the negotiations of this contract, multiple, his cash flow was number one in the NFL for 2023 and number one in the NFL for 2024. That was just not going to happen. And people talk about this like deep discount because like Daniel Jones is going to get more money or something like that. Or people are talking about, hey, Justin Herbert signed a $52 million a year contract. Rodgers is only like $30 million a year, $35 million a year, right? The fact that Rodgers' contract, I think it's 37.5. The fact that Rodgers' contract averages 37.5, while Justin Herbert's is 52 million. Wow, that's incredible. It's such a sacrifice. No, it's not. Take a look at the cash flows for all of these contracts. Rodgers ranks number 6 in cash flow for 2023, number 6 again in 2024. Daniel Jones ranks 2 in cash flow this year, and then 8th in cash flow next year, because a lot of it's from a signing bonus. The only player who gets more cash flow than Daniel Jones, which is why Daniel Jones is not a reasonable comparison, is Lamar Jackson. That's the only player in the NFL, despite the fact that there are guys that signed contracts that average $12 million more a year, right? Multiple, not just Justin Herbert. There's a $51 million a year contract out there too. Despite that, in the first 2 years, they're not seeing more money than Daniel Jones. They're also, this is important, not seeing more money than Aaron Rodgers. If you take a look at the Justin Herbert contract, it's like $75 million 5 years out. Like, that's what it is. And so Rodgers is not competing against hypothetical money in 2027. He's probably not playing in 2027. He is earning the 6th most dollars in the NFL for the next 2 years, and I think the 5th most over the next 3 years. Like if he plays in 2025, which is, that part's not guaranteed, right? By the way, his cap hit in 2025 is $51.5 million, so they're probably going to renegotiate that contract if he does play. Giving up money, but he's coming off of a down year where he forced a trade, and he was, I'm not going to say held hostage by a negotiation because the Jets didn't have much leverage either after the trade, but he was only going to play for one team, so his trade value tanks, right? Which is what we saw. He gets traded for a second and another second, which could turn into a first based off of play. And he signs a shorter deal because he's almost 40. He signs a shorter deal that makes his average look smaller than some other quarterbacks who are signing 5-6 year deals where their average is longer because you get hit in the back end of those deals where the actual money he makes is like 5th in the NFL over the next 3 years. And he's coming off of a down year, right? He was like 17th in the NFL in adjusted net yards per attempt. He had his highest interception rate ever, right? One of his lowest touchdown rates ever, and a lower yards per attempt than he's ever had. So he's coming off of a down year, and he's the 5th highest paid quarterback in the NFL by actual money coming in. He didn't give up anything.
You feel better now that you got all of that off your chest?
No, but maybe in an hour.
We'll get a cookie in you. We'll see where we're at. Kyle Slaby asks, would you rather have the best fullback in the league or the 25th best QB as your backup?
It kind of depends on what you mean by best fullback, right? If it's the best possible version of CJ Ham, probably the quarterback. Man, that sounds like a huge dig at Ham. 25th best quarterback is incredibly valuable. That's all I'm saying. But if it's like the most valuable possible player that plays the fullback position, if you're getting like Kyle Juszczyk, probably Kyle Juszczyk, right? I think I would take that guy. I think he provides more value to a team based off of the way that he adjusts, forces defenses, to just always be wrong, right?
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins has missed one game, and it was because of COVID. It wasn't because of like he took an injury, right? Like, again, injury proneness is like really difficult to predict, and a player that's like healthy for like 8 years in a row can just suddenly miss a season. These things happen. It happened to Daniel Hunter, right? But, there's a lower likelihood that Kirk Cousins is going to miss a year or miss a couple of games. Now that I've said it, oops. But
speaking into existence and all of that.
And then having the 25th best quarterback would be super valuable in that circumstance. But it's a probabilistic kind of question. You're probably not going to need that 25th best quarterback. And the value that somebody like Juszczyk provides is so enormous that I think, relative to other fullbacks, that I think you want that guy because he's going to make an impact on the field guaranteed. But if you're asking me if I want like Tony Richardson, but in like 2022,
Yeah. Let's go to Anya Taylor-Joy, who asks, I suppose jokingly, is Addison officially the fastest player on the team?
God. Yeah, I guess. What's crazy is that the Vikings might have the fastest player in the NFL in Kalen Barnes, because he now that John Ross is retired. Vikings territory pointed this out, by the way. Props to them. But now that John Ross is retired, Kalen Barnes had the fastest 40 at the NFL Combine. So he might be the fastest player in the NFL, but we can't even. You just got this Addison joke. Thanks, Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yes. Now the rest of the mailbag turns into a bit of it goes off of the football stuff. So this is just your warning as we are now devolving into this. Swervin Shervin asks, so on Thursday, I felt a tingling in my pinky after a workout I aborted when I felt a weird pain in my elbow. Friday, I played softball and felt a pop in my tricep. I had pain from my elbow to my right hand since Saturday morning, and it was getting worse until today, which has been the most painful day. I get to the doctor, and he looks at my hand and says...
thank God he went to a doctor. I didn't know where this question was going, because I was like, we can't give medical advice, man. What's going on?
Well, I mean, it hasn't stopped us before.
Yeah, that's true.
I get to the doctor today, he looks at my hand and says, you have shingles.
Oof.
For James's herpes corner, how do I go on living with this pain?
I love that it was James's herpes corner. That's important.
Of course, you appreciated that it wasn't yours. Yes, thank you.
What experience do I? I don't even date.
That's not the. He didn't get this from dating, I'm assuming, but he seems to be living a very active lifestyle, and it caught up with him. You're getting old, and apparently have shingles. No matter what, shingles still sounds like one of those old-timey diseases. Like, you got the vapors.
It's just because of the name, right?
Yeah.
But So evidently it's it's just become more common now. So my understanding of shingles is technically it's a herpes virus, but it's chickenpox. And so chickenpox lays dormant in your system. And it can turn into shingles later in your life or something like that. That's my understanding.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the next question here, which is from Lavar Bolsharif, who asks, for Arif's survivalist corner, Aaron Rodgers' former girlfriend, Shailene Woodley, is an urban forager. The name is what you think it means. Foraging a city for natural growing foods. No gardens, no greenhouses, just what Mother Nature gives you. Do you think you could survive in the Twin Cities urban foraging for a month? A week? If someone gave you $10,000 a day, how long do you think you would last?
So in the strictest sense of the understanding of urban foraging, I could probably last 2, maybe 3 days, maybe 3. Because, the idea is, and there's a bunch of articles on urban foraging. I had already heard of this because I have the kinds of friends who would do this. In my incredibly stupid political circle, this is just a thing. Not a ton of friends. It's not crazy popular among them, but it's a thing. And so the idea is there's more food available even in a city environment than you would think. Cities like to grow fruit trees, along the sides of roads and in park areas and stuff like that. Parking lots will sometimes have fruit trees, and you just don't look at it because it's just part of this urban environment that your eyes glaze over. And you have the ability to find mushrooms, find berries, find other fruits that are just available because the city plants these trees that look beautiful because they flower. And a lot of flowering trees also produce food, and they tend to be edible, kind of. Also, there's just a lot more things that are edible than you think, like nettles, for example. You have to cook them in a particular way. Now, there's a really important caveat here, which is pesticides and pollution, right? That's really important. So I mentioned fruit trees on the side of the road. That's true. They are probably heavily polluted. You should probably not eat that fruit, right? Nettles, I just mentioned nettles, they tend to pick up heavy metals. So if there is the possibility of the soil having heavy metal poisoning, you should not eat those nettles, right? But there are guides out there. Not that I would suggest you look them up. I'm going to link an article about urban foraging, not an article that's a guide to urban foraging, but an article about urban foraging that talks about how people have found, I would say relatively, but like safe ways to engage in this practice of finding acorns and mushrooms, so long as you're good enough at identifying mushrooms and other stuff. And you can, if you learn how to identify certain plants and figure out if they're edible, you can figure that out. So that's a thing. And if I dedicated myself to learning as much about urban foraging as I could, maybe I could survive a day or two or three. But it's just like, again, the urban, unless we're talking about like, if I can take down one of the turkeys that always seems to hang out around my place, I would, in that circumstance, I would eat turkey, right? Because the issue I have with turkey is you have a wide variety of options available to you, and it doesn't make sense to pick turkey. In this circumstance, I do not have a wide available array of options for me. I am foraging. And so, in that case, maybe I could survive for a little bit longer. Depends on the time of year, right? And so, maybe that'll help. There's a lot more greenways and parks than you think in a city. And so you can always end up going to the lake, or you can go to like Minnehaha Park and stuff like that. And so there's like areas where there's going to be a lot more edible food than you would think would be in a city. But I don't know that it would be sustainable, right? Like, I don't know that you're going to get, the carbs that you need, the protein that you need, and so on. That said, there are more expansive definitions of urban foraging than this classical sense, which includes something that, of course, I've learned about almost a decade ago called freeganism. And it is finding free food. It is a relic of our economic system that a bunch of perfectly fine food gets thrown out for a number of reasons that have nothing to do with legal obligations to serve safe food, but more to do with maybe maximizing returns on investment. And a bakery just cannot sell day-old bagels. They can't sell day-old muffins. They throw them out. It is not legal in most states or most municipalities to search a grocery store or bakery's garbage for food that is packaged and for the most part safe. I should stress the for the most part a bit. But it is available. And so if you're not as concerned about the legality of it, and we have seen a ton of evidence, and there's video now because everyone has access to recording video, of grocery stores calling the cops on people attempting to secure food that had been thrown. The grocery store was perfectly willing to throw away. They do not make a profit or a loss based off of whether or not you steal the food. And it is legally theft, I should say. I guess they do make a loss in that you've not gone into the grocery store to purchase food, but you know what I mean, right? The food is they've already accounted for that as a loss. They do not lose more, but they still call the cops, and the cops enforce that law.
We are in some real interesting legally gray
I would
area
never
here.
encourage anybody to violate the law. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying a more expansive definition of urban foraging would potentially include that. That is all I'm saying. So if you put me in a survival scenario where I'm forced and allowed to, if the law is not a particular concern of mine for whatever reason, maybe the law has been suspended, maybe we're only talking about a hypothetical, maybe we're in a different municipality where it is legal, right? I don't know. But if I'm in a situation where I am forced to survive on food that I find in the city, that would include freeganism. And I think I would be able to do it. But not the classic definition of urban foraging. No, I don't think I'd be able to do it for very long.
I enjoy this the backlash here, because originally it was Arif as like a bougie cookie enjoyer, and and not of the people. And now you're put into the situation of like, oh yeah, I could totally do the freeganism. I
would never suggest to you on a recorded medium that I've engaged in freeganism, because for the most part it is law breaking. But I would suggest that I would be surprisingly adept at that. Who's to say?
Who is to say, indeed. LeVar Bolsharif also asks, for the Arif debate career corner, what was a time when you thought, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, during a debate?
Boy, there's so many stories. I've made no secret of the fact that even though I am arrogant now, I was much more arrogant when I did debate, both high school and college, but especially high school. Shockingly, I became less arrogant over time. What you see here now is a 34-year trough in my arrogance. I came out of the womb the most arrogant person you can imagine, and then I suddenly became more arrogant by the time I was my senior in high school. And it was just a slow humbling from there. So you can imagine.
He's somewhat less insufferable now than he was 10 years ago.
Yes, that is accurate. That's the best way to put it.
Arif Hassan, a work in progress.
Look, what a great start to the Kirk Cousins era.
Yep.
Just a bunch of people mad about one tweet happened during a game. I'm going to miss that when X goes down. So as you could probably figure out, me at the height of my arrogance as a high school debater had a number of these moments. I did have these moments in college as well. But I think, I've made people cry in debates. I'm honestly not ashamed of that. I think that it's one thing to make somebody cry in a debate round because you were mean in an unjustified way. That's awful, right? I think I probably thought that at the time. I can't say for sure, but I think I probably thought that at the time. But making someone cry because you destroyed them, I think that you're fine. Ethically, you're fine. People don't get mad because the team that wins March Madness made the team that lost last in March Madness cry. No one gets mad at that. So why would you get mad at another competition, right? Football players cry all the time when they lose. That's normal. So you make a team cry in a debate round, that's fine. So long as you don't do it for reasons that are unjustified, like personal attacks or bullying or something. So I've made a lot of teams cry in debate rounds. This is not a story about that. So this guy ended up becoming in college a better debater than me, but at the time he wasn't in high school. So I was debating against him and his partner. I think they were a year younger than me. And they ran this somewhat confusing argument. He ended up getting really into Nietzsche-based arguments in college, but I don't think this was that. But it was a somewhat confusing argument. It weaved in elements of psychoanalysis and Marxism and all of these other kind of elements that kind of cohered in a way that if you thought about it a lot, it maybe would make a ton of sense. But in a debate round environment, especially from a high schooler, it just wasn't really connecting. It's one of those things that you read it and you get it, and then you're forced to explain it and you just kind of don't. And I knew that they understood the material, but I also knew that they did not have confidence. They did not have the confidence to explain that material. And so I asked them 2 or 3 questions in cross-examination after their first speech. As been 2 or 3 questions in cross-examination. I knew that they probably couldn't explain it after they gave their speech, but I knew after the second question of cross-ex that they just didn't have it. They didn't have the juice. And so I started performing, right? I started raising my voice and being incredulous and being I can't believe you would say that. And this doesn't make sense. And doesn't this contradict this? One of those things where it looks like a contradiction on face, but if you dig down, it's not. And I knew that and they knew that, but they have to explain it. Otherwise it doesn't count. It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you say. Right. And then by the end of cross-ex is 3 minutes. And by the end of cross-ex, or maybe 2 minutes, 30 seconds into cross-ex, I'm look, if you can explain this right now, I'm going to concede the round. We'll walk out of here. You get the win. I would advocate to the judge that you get 30 speaker points. That's the most speaker points you can get around. And we'll be done. And my partner did not know that I was doing this. Did not know that I was offering to just concede the round. And he just looked at me what are you doing? come on, like I didn't agree to this. Like you can't just make a decision like that. And he wasn't like he like let me run the team, so it wasn't like an equal. If I'm going to be honest, it wasn't an equal partnership. He'd be the first to tell you that. But he wants to win too. Like he doesn't want. And so he looks at me, and I don't look at him at all. Right? I'm just like, I can't. This is the moment where I have to project the most possible confidence. So I can't look at my partner to see if this is okay. I'm not going to look at my opponents because it's traditionally in cross-ex, you don't look at your opponent, you look at the judge. I'm going to look straight at the judge and said, I'm going to concede the round if you can explain this one sentence to me right now. You have 30 seconds. And he didn't say anything. And I know that if I asked him, like in practice, right? If we were on the same team, if I asked him in practice, hey, can you explain this? Like, condense it down next 30 seconds. He would have done it just fine. But I had so effectively pushed him around in cross-ex that he was just spinning and he just like lost the confidence to be able to explain it. And he was just like, and he knows this stuff, right? Like I said, he ended up becoming a better debater than me in college. He's a smart dude.
But you crushed him in this particular moment.
Crushed him. And the judge almost voted for us, right? I mean, we had to finish the round. But the judge was like, yeah, it's the only 30 I've given, gosh, I want to say in the last 5 years. And I was like, yeah, it was. I killed it. And I sit back down and I was like, I told my partner, sorry, it felt like the right thing to do. And my partner, who was mad in the moment, was like, that ruled. That was the right thing to do.
Well, yeah, because it turned out not to bite you in the, yeah, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you feel it, you make it audible, the audible works. Sometimes you're Brett Favre. It's not a pick, it's a touchdown. So,
and by the end of it, you're defrauding the state of Mississippi. That's just the way these things go.
I mean, I did that at the end of the round. Yeah, for sure. That's
one has to, as one must. Let's go to Tyler Fornes, who asks, for Arif's home decor corner, will Arif use the Arif shower curtain in his home in honor of the 10th anniversary, or would he prefer the one that has sayings like "be racist" and "throwing left" surrounding an Arif?
Is this okay? So will I use the shower curtain? Oh, so am I going to use the existing shower curtain design that people? Well, I mean, technically, it's all three, right? All three. I believe so. Yes. Curtain. But the one we advertise is the Arif one, the Christmas one.
Yes.
So it's either that or the one that has words like "be racist" on it. That is a tough one to explain. I didn't think about that actually, because I don't think of these things as items for public consumption. I think of these things as like, this is a funny picture. I'm laughing at it. Let's sell it. I don't think of it like someone's gonna have to wear a shirt that says "be racist" on it, huh? But okay. Step one of the answering this question is I want to make it. I don't have a home right now. I'm not homeless in any real sense. I wouldn't be recording a podcast.
You're not doing the freeganism thing or anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, the home I'm in is not mine, but I'm also not renting it. Okay. That sounds like I'm squatting. I want to be clear. That's not it either, but, yeah, so I can't, I'm not really empowered to decorate at the moment. But let's say it was 6 months ago when I had a home. God, that sounds so bleak. I promise it's not as bleak as it sounds. No. No.
I love how your brain just is an absolute no. We not for king or country, not for love or money. No, there's no way I could possibly have done this.
Here's the thing. If you asked, again, high school Arif, would you have a shower curtain with 3 of your face on it? He would say yes, unequivocally. No question, right? That's uncomfortable, man. Not because I can see myself looking at me. I don't have problems with mirrors, for example, but it's just like that is an unbridled level of arrogance to have that in your own home and to have guests walk in and be like, is that shower curtain I'm uncomfortable wearing the Christmas sweater of me.
Well, to be fair. Oh, okay. Well,
I guess if I could pick one, if I had to pick one, it'd be the one with fewer Arif faces. In fact, the one that has James's face and Dusty's face and in a sense Luke's face, that that one's better because it implies, hey, this is like a team project I'm proud of. But the Arif one is just like, hey, is that 3 of you?
Yeah.
You just have that in your home?
I mean, who doesn't have a special shower curtain for the holidays?
I did stay at somebody's place for Halloween once, and they had themed everything for Halloween, and I was like, was this for the whole month? She's like, no, I don't decorate for the whole month. This is for the last 2 weeks because it was like Halloween the next day. And it was Halloween shower curtain, Halloween throw pillows, Halloween hand towels. And like the thing that like bothered me was not, wow, that takes a lot of work to like redecorate your house just for like 2 weeks. It's where do you put all this stuff? Halloween is like a decently large holiday, but it's not like the big one, right? You clearly also have Christmas ones. I'm worried that you might have Valentine's ones. Maybe you have Thanksgiving ones, but like you have multiples. Where do you put all of this? Yeah, that's the thing that bothers me.
That's way too far. I'm sorry. You can have decorations for like the outside of your home, but decorating for Halloween in your bathroom, that's
so much. And like hand towels in the kitchen, hand towels in the bathroom, towels in the bathroom, shower, like so much.
That's a no for me. That's absolutely a no for me. All right, so I've got another one of these well wishes here, and my phone's being a little funny.
You have more? The notes don't say you have more.
No, I've got another one. Hold on, it's being a little bit. One sec. I'm trying to get this to play back.
Sure you are.
All right. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hello. Is this thing on? Is this working? You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
What's going on? I didn't know if this was a recording and you were doing a bit in the recording or if you were live.
We actually could have done that. It would have been great.
I was famous for doing that with my cell phone voicemail.
Yeah, it'd be like a voice.
So, that.
I was justified in wondering if you were actually asking for a response.
It's true. That gag only predates the show by about another 10 years.
So how's the basement that you're definitely not in?
Well, I was sitting here just gazing at my own obituary. And
a thing that has happened as a result of the show.
What a good
I just couldn't help but think what a mistake this all was. And mostly I just wanted to express a feeling of like
deep remorse.
Just really sincere and profound regret, I would call it. That this has gone on as long as it has.
So, okay, when you pitched this to me way back at my brother's wedding, I ripped that marriage, I guess. When you pitched this to me, did you have any idea that this would last more than a year, 5 years, 10? Do you envision a 10-year future for the show?
Oh, 100% no.
Dusty and I's things lasted maybe 2 years out of that.
Yeah, I gave it I would say 1 to 5 years would have been the scale
reasonable.
Of time that I was going for. If things went really well, we might survive 3 to 5 years. And, podcasting was still a very heady medium. It wasn't Joe Rogan was there, but he wasn't like Spotify there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and also one of the things about podcasting, right now, there's so many tools to make it so easy. You just log, this is what we're doing. You just log into Zencaster and the recording audio, it takes care of everything for you. At the time, we were just like, oh, do we have to download this shady program called Pamela so we can record our Skype calls?
We had software that actively made it harder to record the show.
Yeah. And then we uploaded it to distributors that made it worse.
Yeah.
It was remarkable.
Yeah, for a while we were using was it Blog Talk Radio, I think?
Yep, Blog Talk did it for a little while, yeah.
Yeah, everything was so difficult because it wasn't a mature medium, and we had a thin market to compete against. We talked about that at the top of the show. But man, what a weird... I'm just happy you didn't have to explain to me what a podcast was when you pitched it. That's where we were at. We're
I was ready to do it. I would have if I needed to.
Yeah. But yeah, so for people who don't know, it's Dusty pitched this to me, And he was like, I don't think we're going to make very much money from this, which I'm not going to, he didn't lead with that, by the way. He wasn't like he was underselling it or anything like that. But he was like, the whole goal here is Arif, like you've got a potential career in front of you. And I think that, if you put this in your pocket, you've got another thing that'll help you launch your career. It'll help you out a lot. It'll advance your career. So there's a really from my perspective, maybe it wasn't actually, but from my perspective, it's an incredibly selfless act where he volunteered himself, and I don't know whether or not it was beknownst to James, but James, to put in time, every week or twice a week even, to help me grow my career. And it unquestionably did that. It helped me land multiple dream jobs, having this podcast available, being a developed voice in the Vikings, having enough experience speaking into a recorded medium, which I have a lot of speech experience, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're doing this, or you have to meet radio timelines or whatever. And podcasting gave me the skills and the resume to really advance my career in a big way. And Dusty didn't really ask for anything in return. It was enormous. It's huge.
It's why
Dusty
Dusty
without Dusty or James.
It's why Dusty's on the shirt this time around. We're honoring Dusty's spirit.
Well, so when you approached me about being on the shirt, I said goated, but somewhere along the line that got translated to ghosted, I guess.
Basically.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of how that worked.
Yeah.
I found that would be my only note. But
well, Arif wanted to be taller, and when Dave got the comment, he went, "No, I'm going to make him shorter, and I'm going to make the pillow larger." So
I want to be clear. I didn't ask for me physically, the person, to be on the shirt to be taller. I asked for the height that I had on the shirt to be more than James's height, because that's the lore of the show. But that doesn't mean you have to draw my figure anytime. I'm on a high chair, essentially. Let's call it a lifeguard chair.
It looked like a lifeguard chair. There, yeah.
And what was really asked was the lifeguard chair be made so that it's just a smidgen taller than James to continue that particular joke with the show. Not that I physically would overwhelm James or anything like that. I just want to be clear.
This is a great explanation after the fact. This is in no way what he had conveyed to me when I sent the message to Dave.
Well, there's things we all want, it sounds like.
Oh, Dusty. So you excited to be hosting Arif and I in November for the Broncos game?
Extremely. I was actually just at the prospective venue the other day, just hanging out,
chilling,
potentially letting him know that a smallish army of deranged Vikings fans will likely be darkening the door.
Which is any other kind of army of Vikings fans?
Yeah, which is to say Vikings fans. Yeah. Is it is the place that is it the same place that you and I had gone to when you were working there, right?
Yeah, I am no longer in their employ, but unrelated to that, they have kind of expanded their operation a little bit. I was screwing around with their new sports simulators, football, baseball, soccer. The soccer one was pretty fun. Rugby. It's a cool place to hang out, and we'll be able to cram in a lot of people. If anyone in the area near the day of the game is available to see us all live.
Yeah, we pimped it a bit at the beginning of the show and said venue is just being finalized, but we're working on the day and everything. But yeah, this place rules. This is going to be an absolutely fun time for anybody who wants to come in and see a live show. We don't do anything in the Denver area. Why not take an opportunity like this to prove that Dusty is not in my basement, Dusty is not dead, and Dusty is.
Will he be making an appearance? Because if he sets up the venue from a place he used to work at and then just doesn't show up, I feel like it would not dispel the rumors.
Well, if he showed up painted blue like the Muppets from the the Christmas Carol, like the dead, like Marley and Marley, whatever. Like if he showed up in blue like the picture from the T-shirt, I feel like that would go a long way to proving that he's dead. But I don't think Dusty has that level of commitment. I think I think he's going to enjoy living. I think Dusty is on the side of life.
I don't know, you guys. I'm looking at my own obituary.
A surreal experience, I'm sure.
Am I? Are you sure?
Legally, it is important for us to say that you are alive and well and not stuffed in anyone's basement. That is important for us to point out.
I think there's a lot of things it's important for you to legally say. I've only been listening for about half the mailbag.
I get a text from Dusty. It just says mushrooms in like 30-point font with question marks on it.
Yeah,
that's part of urban foraging. Mushrooms are part of it. You just have to be good at identifying mushrooms, because if you make a mistake there, it's probably your last mistake. I'm just saying. But that is an element that all of the urban foraging guides talk about, / also my stupid friends that won't stop talking about urban foraging. They're like, yeah, you can get mushrooms. And it's like, I'm good. But that's like a big part of the thing. So I'm just saying that's on the table, but you shouldn't put it on the table. I'm just saying it is on the table.
Unless also, you have like a professional guide to teach you that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. You should not just start urban foraging. Even if you avoid mushrooms entirely, you're going to make a lot of mistakes that are potentially fatal if you just start urban foraging. Because it's not like these don't go through like a FDA inspection process. You have no guarantee on the safety of the food, or even if you're eating food instead of poison. So
you took a long time to get to even just the notion of maybe dabbling in freeganism. Whereas, when you were answering the question, I thought, well, am I allowed to just steal stuff? Can I just go get breakfast Aladdin style?
So in the spirit of the way the term is used, foraging. Yeah. But I would imagine that in a challenge scenario, I would want to exploit all of the resources available to me, theoretically. This is a funny conversation I have with Dusty, because every time I hang out with Dusty, I have some of the best food I've ever eaten. In like some maybe places that are a little bit too posh. But I mean, Dusty knows food. And this is a funny conversation I have with him, which I expect where we're going to host the show is going to have some like banger cocktails and maybe some really great food.
I don't know. We'll check the dumpster. We'll see what.
Naturally, that is how
they have back there.
The menu, or as everyone else calls it, the dumpster. Yeah.
I'll tell you what. You'll probably find a football game in there. For all the talk, I have low expectations. I imagine. We have many weeks to cogitate more about whatever that mess is going to be. But my initial feeling about the Broncos...
That's okay. They just had like two of their receivers get like irreparably injured for the season. Don't worry about it.
Receivers aren't important, as it turns out. Running backs, where's that?
No Tim Patrick, sell.
Yeah, no KJ Hamler, no Tim Patrick. It's fine.
You guys got Ben DiNucci, though. I mean, you got a hell of a backup back there.
I mean, honestly, starter.
Fewer things are now possible.
Oh, that's too bad.
The power of Ben DiNucci.
Possibly true. Well, thank you, Dusty. Thank you for coming on and schooling Arif as best as you could.
I want to say congratulations to everybody in Minnesota. Thank you for helping to celebrate Colorado's birthday by legalizing weed and all the various cannabis products that go along with that. I look forward to you getting to know the same brands that have swept California and Colorado and a few other states with just some really great products.
You heard it here first. Dusty loves corporate weed.
All right.
Big agriculture, but for marijuana. Dusty's a big fan.
All of a sudden, I'm hearing the song "Sell Out" by Real Big Fish in my head. Why is that? I don't.
Well, it's true. I don't have to sign that paper tonight.
No. But you do have to work in fast food all your life?
Oh. All right. It's been real, guys. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the festivities surrounding the Broncos game.
Sounds good.
It's going to be a ton of fun.
Looking forward to it, man. We will. I'll talk to you later, man.
Happy trails.
Thank you, Dusty, for coming on. And since we are in the process of doing the looking back thing, the real Jack asks, for Arif's Nietzschean recurrence corner, if time is indeed a flat circle, aren't we celebrating an anniversary for Norse Code, too infinite and vast for mortal minds to comprehend? And isn't celebrating this anniversary as meaningless as our daily toils? Anyway, cheers to 10 more.
Okay, well, the last sentiment expressed there was very Nietzschean recurrence. So I'll give this one a pass. But the point of Nietzschean recurrence is not that literally time repeats itself, but rather to act as if time were to repeat itself ad infinitum and to embrace life in that sense. There's a very roll the dice approach to it. And also in that spirit, you take the W's where you get them. That's what Friedrich Nietzsche says. Quote, take the W's where you get them, dash Friedrich Nietzsche, 1886.
Dash Michael Scott.
Dash Michael Scott. You're right.
Good Lord. Jack asks, so we had the real Jack and now we have not real Jack. Recently, Barack Obama put out a summer playlist. If the 42nd best player in the NFL was to release something similar, what are some songs you think he'd recommend? Is Kirk Chains a big Dave Matthews guy? Or perhaps a Creed stan?
This is funny. So first I thought you said Barack Obama and then if the 42nd best player. And I thought Barack Obama for a brief second was also the 42nd president. And I was like, oh, that's a kind of a nice, but no, he's 44th. I guess depending on how you count, was it Taft? High school me would have killed me for not knowing the order of the presidents. Doesn't matter. So you nailed it. Kirk is a huge Creed fan. And I don't know if you knew this, but like as soon as I read the question, I was like, oh, does he know? But like, yeah. Huge Creed fan. He tweeted about it back in like 2016. It's been like a part of his thing. He actually at one point tried to get a private Creed concert organized. Like this is a guy that like famously just does not spend money. He's got like a used Windstar as his van. His house is like not a bad house. Like he clearly, I mean, you've seen the documentary, it's a nice house, right? But like he could have spent way more up. He doesn't spend a ton on clothes. I'm not saying this to indicate that Kirk is like this wonderful frugal figure we should all aspire to. And, you know, maybe that's the case, but rather it's very clear where he wants to spend his money. And it's on private Creed concerts. That's how big a fan he is. He even mentioned, like on an interview with Kyle Brandt in 2020, he even was like, yeah, I mean, even if I can't get Creed, I mean, it'd be nice to get Scott Stapp here, lead singer of Creed, and just sing some of the, he is way into Creed. And there's like, and there's this quote from this interview that he has with Kyle Brandt. It goes back to middle school for me. That was the jam. Going to the weight room in middle school, you're going to get a lift in, and you've got Creed playing in the background. And then someone decided that they weren't cool. I don't know who that was or why, but someone decided they weren't cool, and then they went away. I'm with Washington. I'm in the weight room, and the song comes on. I don't hate it. I never hated the song. Why can't it be a good song? He has always been in on Creed, and also I have no idea where he got this idea. Maybe that's just what it was like in Holland, Michigan. Creed was like never cool. Kirk and I are like the same age. Creed was like never cool. Like, what? What are you talking about? Obviously, it was popular, right? But like Nickelback is popular. And for actually, this is not a fair comparison because for a brief moment they were cool. But like, you know, things can be popular and not very cool, and people react to them in ways that like are a product of their popularity, right? So you can like, maybe it's this like pseudo counterculture thing, but it's weird to talk about Creed that way. But like, I knew he was always a big Creed fan. Turns out in that interview he shares, or with the Washington Post, he shared like some of his playlist, and it is like in my mind, I was like, oh, I bet he's into Switchfoot. And he is, and it's on his playlist. It's perfect. James called this out actually when we were doing pre-show prep. He's like, I was thinking maybe Switchfoot. James, you were right. Brain, Arif, you were right as well. He name dropped Switchfoot. Now, if people aren't familiar, because I guess not everybody is, Switchfoot used to be a big Christian rock band and then just kind of toned down the Christianness and just became a rock band, but they never got rid of it. It was always kind of part of who they were. And you know, you were meant for so much more. That I think is a pretty clear like Christian call out in their most popular song. I actually became somewhat familiar with Switchfoot because I had a roommate that went to this like super, like, so, you know, I knew him in high school and he was like super Christian in high school. Then he went to the super conservative Christian college in Nebraska. It's like this, like, there's like a couple of schools of conservative Lutherans that exist, like debates between like Missouri Synod and other ELCA and stuff like that. And this is like more conservative than all of that. And he goes there and he just decides like, oh, this is all BS. And he becomes an atheist. But that doesn't stop him from liking the music that he likes. So he moves back to Minnesota. He drops out of that college. Or he transfers to the University of Minnesota. And so he's an atheist that just like his entire musical history is all Christian rock, right? That's what he liked in high school. And so he can't like escape it, like from an identity perspective. He can start listening to music, and I'm sure he had, but like Switchfoot was his favorite band. So I heard a lot of it, and I heard a lot of like really obscure Switchfoot songs, and one like stuck with me, and I was like trying to Google it before the show. And it's like, I shouldn't say obscure. It was on like their, I think it's highest charting album, but like there's a lot more I know about Switchfoot than I thought I would. But yeah, so he lists Creed, The Fray, Switchfoot, I don't know how to pronounce this, Matt Kearney, and Midnight Pilot, which Midnight Pilot is a band like 3 of his high school friends are on. And these are all former, or at the time, Christian rock bands. I don't know if people knew that about Creed, but Christian rock band. The only one that he listed that I could not determine was a Christian rock band was Parachute, which I'd never heard of before either. Maybe that's just I'm sheltered in a particular way. But like these are all Christian rock bands. Like that's just who he is as a person. I would also suggest that if you look at pictures of all of the people in this band, you'll notice a particular pattern, like a vanilla-ish pattern, taking a look through the picture. It's not 100%, but it's a pattern. This is not like an accusation. It's just like kind of the things that you're exposed to growing up are the things that you enjoy. He also mentions music in his book. He doesn't like music that glorifies wealth or glorifies sex. And I'm not going to say that that tracks onto a genre or anything like that he may have listened to a lot, exposing himself to new people at Michigan State, at Washington, or anything like that. But, that's something to kind of keep in mind in terms of the music that he listens to or how he characterizes music that other people listen to. But my understanding is based off of some of the conversations that we've had over the years about, what's being played in the locker room and in the weight room, that he has expanded, because this was the Creed tweet was in 2016. This interview was right after the 2020 offseason, right before the season started. He has expanded my understanding of the music that he likes. He just today was shouting out Stacey's mom, which I believe the lead singer of Fountains of Wayne passed away very recently, so rips. But Stacey's mom, super popular when I was in high school. A song that very clearly is not Christian, and I would argue maybe glorifies impure thoughts. I think that's pretty fair.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So, it's not a 100% guiding light. He clearly was a big fan of the song, which that's just good taste. Saying that, I feel very washed, but, whatever. But, it's not like he's isolated from this other music or doesn't like the other music. But if you could pick what's on his playlist, it probably is not a lot of Fountains of Wayne, right? Not a ton of Kings of Leon, right? Maybe better than Ezra. I don't know, but it's like Creed and Switchfoot, and I don't know, Newsboys. Like I'm sure that's on in his circulation.
Yeah. Lake Cavassier asks, will there be a special 10th anniversary Arif waifu pillow asking for an enemy? I mean, the closest thing you're gonna get is what's on the new merch. So you might as well enjoy that or talk to Damian Barrett.
You don't need to like point him in any. You don't gotta point him in any directions. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Professor Poop, the 10th anniversary. Congratulations. Have you have put together quite the non-poopy product. Of course, I'd like to know, what episode do you consider to be the poopiest?
All right, so poopy in a good sense, probably the 2009 NFC Championship game rewatch. Poopy in a bad sense, the 6-hour episode previewing the New York Giants, which some of it just had to be scrubbed because it was too long, and some of it had to be scrubbed because Dusty said some stuff he shouldn't have said.
Yeah, it was an interesting episode to be sure. I mean, we've had a couple of episodes where we recorded and just went, we can't release this. It didn't work out. Tech issues or otherwise. Like, it just didn't end up happening. It just didn't end up working. So we've had a few of those that, and judging on the number of like people who've requested it, I really wish that we had the Josh Freeman episode.
I know.
But we
oh my
do
God.
not have it. So
we don't have, and like James has looked. Like he's looked. Yeah.
One day we may have to sit down and just watch that.
I think that would be a great watch along. We haven't done a football game watch along since that. Yeah. So
let's take a look at Ingram's Left Foot's question, who asks, what have been your best and worst accomplishments over the past 10 years?
Jeez. Well, I bought a house. Well, I guess not. That's gone now. My house did not disappear. That was cool.
He says,
yeah, it's not stuffed in a basement. It's not writing hostage letters. I don't know. I got like a job to be a Vikings beat writer. That's crazy. I just started blogging about stuff. I became a Vikings beat writer. That's nuts. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, getting a full-time job after just kind of being dumb about a team, right? Like that. I think that's cool. That's so cool. That's one of my biggest accomplishments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like being able to afford visiting my family, that like, I didn't know why that was like such a big like barrier, but I was like, oh my God, I could just pay for my flight to Vermont. That's crazy. And like, just say, I don't know, like having that agency is cool. Worst accomplishments, any meme that we've come up with, those are all the worst ones. Well, throwing left is great. Ben DiNucci's awesome.
Yeah.
And Case Cook is obviously, I mean, that's a whole different, that might be a best accomplishment. But like all the other ones, like Be Racist, Bull Sharif, which I don't even think came up on the show. It was just like a Discord meme.
That came up.
That ended up on the show.
Yeah, that started as a thing on the show and turned into the revolution.
Oh, so I thought it started in the Discord and then creeped into the show. That was the other way around? Okay.
That started as a throwaway line I had, and it just went from there.
It's a good one. Unfortunately. As most of the memes in the show are regrettable. I think Damien was the one who started the Norse Code Nessie, right? I mean, obviously it built off of the 350 thing.
No, that was actually a fellow. It was John Mainland who
John. Sorry,
us with that.
Confusing my non-British UK livers.
Yes, but
yeah.
Best and worst accomplishments.
So I got onto a couple of Irish football podcasts because of that Mayo FC thing. I don't know if that's best or worst, but that's crazy.
So this weekend, it's like podcast related. I fell this weekend while walking on a dock out in Bemidji, and nobody laughed. So I think that's right up there with my worst accomplishments over the past 10 years, is I've now gotten to the age where nobody laughs when I fall. So
that's rough.
Like, my son was there, my brother was there, his friend was there, and they were all genuinely concerned. And I looked at them afterwards. It was like this dramatic fall too. Like, you could see it coming. Like the dock had like I say broken off. It like kind of like raise up in part of it, and it was with either my flip flops or it was the actual the drinks I was bringing. I was wheeling out in the cooler, and it caught, and I like fell onto my shoulder, and everyone's like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you okay?" And of course, your son is gonna be like, he worries about everything anyway, so he's like already like there, like trying to make sure I'm okay. And I just looked at the three of them and went, you guys really need to laugh harder next time, because this is not like
this is humiliating.
That.
I'd rather you make fun of me, because the alternative is that I am old and frail.
That. I mean, I realize that I'm a 6'5" hill giant, but like still. Drop Play Dave asks, where did all that time go, and do you think you've led a fulfilling life?
The answer is that time disappears in the ether. It's unrecoverable. That's what life is. And have I led a fulfilling life based off of that answer? No.
I was having a moment this weekend as I watched my son do a bunch of things that boys his age do.
Not like eating humans, right?
No. That was a step kid. This was more like going around on like a jet ski, swimming around at the lake, and having the realization that he's never going to be small again. He's never going to be small. This is as young as he's ever going to be moving forward. And like the passage of time ends up messing with you really hard at that particular moment. I don't know if it's necessarily been a fulfilling life, but it's been it's been interesting to be. I always feel like, and as somebody, and you can attest to this, I have a million stories about a million things. I have stuff from this month that we didn't get a chance to talk about on the pre-show stuff because we needed to get into the show. But like,
yes.
I have had a very interesting existence, and I always feel a bit like I'm a bit player in it. Like I'm kind of on the outside. Like I'm not the main character, but I am the person who's there to like document the dumb stuff that happened during it.
Well, I mean, like think about this, like Forrest Gump. Obviously, the movie itself is a compelling story, but the whole bit is that he is always in the background of these historical events, right?
Yeah,
and it's like you're Forrest Gump.
a bit. It does feel a bit like that. So of course, like the crazier things that would end up happening to me, like, oh yeah, of course, why would this not? So it turns into a bit of that. So a fulfilling life. There have been times, there have been moments. Zen Cupid asks, for the Norse Code Formula Corner, over the past 10 years of the podcast, Norse Code has had a lot of formulas to success. With the early formula days of we go out and hit people in the mouth and Christian Ponder sucks, to the more recent formula of the Vikings are not to be trusted. Which of the formulas was the most successful to describe that season's Vikings team? Which formula was the weakest? And after saying and reading the word formula this many times, does it now seem like it's not actually a word? Formula.
I believe that is called semantic satiation, when you say a word often enough that it doesn't feel like a word anymore. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we were talking about this before the show. Technically, Christian Ponder sucks was very accurate to that season. I don't know that it spiritually captures the season, because it also happened to be, well, one of the two seasons that was the formula for. It also happened to be like a record-breaking season for a guy named Adrian Peterson. And so that doesn't really capture the spirit of the season, even though it was 100% accurate, right? And 2013 was a pretty weird year. And so that is, Christian Ponder sucking is like an element, but it's not like the season. So I'd say probably the Vikings are not to be trusted, I think is probably the most accurate to the spirit of that Viking season.
Either that or last year's This Is Not Sustainable. Because it wasn't.
I mean, like it did set up like the falling off the cliff aspect of the playoffs. So in that sense, but like it felt pretty wrong for much of the season. But the longer it felt wrong, the righter it would feel when it was right.
It's just a little bit ridiculous. Well, I've got one more of these, so we're gonna see if this works. And because of who it's from, absolutely no guarantee if this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a shot here and see if it works.
Hey guys, Arif, James, congratulations on 10 years of the Norse Code podcast. Can't believe it's been that long. You know, if Seventh Heaven can make over 10 years, I guess why not Norse Code, right? Hey, Di, is it possible that I can leave the garage and come back in the house?
It's Lady Di, and no.
So Don from Ohio wishes us well. Speaking of which, Don, get well soon. I saw that you were in the hospital, so you get a couple of questions answered here while we deal with this. And I enjoy that Don's wife made an appearance here. So Lady Di,
that's phenomenal. Yeah.
Welcome to Norse Code lore. If
you're listening, Lady Di, you deserve better.
No one on this show disagrees. Don from Ohio asks, after watching Quarterback on Netflix, I have a bigger admiration for Kirk Cousins. I never realized how tough he was or how many hits he was taking. You got to see the ways they tried to get his body ready every week, and what I was most proud of was the fact that he switched from propane to wood pellet smoker grills, which was the main reason for his quick recovery time. Look how much better his steaks looked. I couldn't think of a better time to start a sponsorship with Pit Boss Grills to show what a miracle product this is.
Does he mean like a sponsorship from the show or a sponsorship for Kirk Cousins?
I think Kirk Cousins at this particular moment. But what was great was that the Twitter account for Pit Boss Grills liked the tweet. So I enjoyed that. Also, was Oppenheimer the worst prequel movie ever made? No mention of Godzilla in it or a post-credit scene showing the King of Monsters. Disappointing.
That is an elite Don from Ohio question. That's like a throwback to some of the best questions he's had. That's an incredible one.
Finally, here's a thought-provoking one that's oddly football-based. Which quarterback gets booed first by their hometown crowd or by their home crowd? Love, Carr, Jones, Goff, Jimmy G, or Geno Smith?
So I think Geno Smith and Jared Goff, I think we can just take off the list. I think everyone's just kind of like, we didn't expect this. This is nice. I guess it's over, right? I think it's going to take a long time for their level of underperformance to lead to boos. I think with Jimmy Garoppolo in Las Vegas, new team, maybe just wait. Maybe they'll all just be like, well, maybe it's just a year. Maybe it takes a year. Maybe the same thing with Derek Carr in New Orleans. And so for me, it's down to Jordan Love or Daniel Jones. And while I respect how vitriolic the New York market can get, I think they've been conditioned to think that if you win a lot, that's fine. You can have some down years. Eli Manning has ruined them as a fan base in terms of what to expect from quarterbacks. And the fact that, he just had a couple of down years here and there, most of his career, let's say. But he lucked his way into a couple of Super Bowls. And everyone loves Eli over there, right? And I feel like because the comparisons between Daniel Jones and Eli Manning were really strong, which now they look kind of ridiculous given how good of a runner Daniel Jones is. But Vanilla Vic, right? But attitudinally, the way that he carries himself, the way that he dresses the media, kind of how he looks, the fact that they're the same quarterback coach in college, all of those things. So I think they'll just give him a longer leash, even though everyone was just kind of I don't know if he has it, because I think that the run of the playoffs and the playoff win gives him a little bit of credit. I don't know that the Packers crowd has been trained to deal with quarterbacks that struggle.
Well, what happened when Aaron Rodgers came out for his first season and a half? He wasn't good, but he wasn't getting booed out at home.
But people were talking about how good he was gonna be, right? People were bought in. Mm-hmm. I remember, what was it, before the 2008 season? He was Aaron Rodgers is going to be so good. You got to give it in fantasy. And I remember thinking this doesn't make any sense. Aaron Rodgers is fine. He's a fine quarterback. I don't know, man. Why is everyone talking about how good this guy is, how good he's going to be? There's no evidence of it. There's just a lot of hope and optimism for this guy. It turned out to be accurate, and maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe his 2007 season was actually quite good and showed a lot of promise. But my memory of that season was that it was fine, and that it was weird that everyone was talking about before 2008, and that you should draft him. And I was like, well, I'm absolutely not going to draft him in fantasy. My mistake. But it was weird. And then, and I think with Jordan Love, there's just not patience, because we're used to young quarterbacks struggling if we're living in 2008. I don't think we're used to that anymore. I think if you struggle as a young quarterback, it's man, I hope he's Josh Allen, but otherwise I'm out. And it's not Bills fans were comfortable with Josh Allen by the end of his second year or anything like that. And at least with Josh Allen, you're well, you have to start right away. This guy's been sitting on the bench for 4 years. So I don't know. I think that a lack of quick success is going to get to Packers fans more than it would get to Giants fans.
The other problem with the Giants thing is that Jones just got paid, and as a result, you have a little bit more of an expectation if you just got paid.
No, that's true. I don't know that because they didn't boo Daniel Jones in the final year, at least from my recollection, maybe I'm wrong, in the final year of the Gettleman, whoever the coach was era. Who's the coach? I don't remember. That's how good of a coach he was, I guess. And he struggled a lot, right? And that's why the coach and the GM were both fired. I guess the GM technically resigned, if I'm trying to remember correctly. But they let him struggle without booing.
Yeah.
And now he's got some success behind him to back him up. So I don't know. For whatever reason,
I see Jimmy G as the only candidate for this one. Geno Smith, I don't think that ends up happening. They were just so surprised by how well that worked last year.
They got a free season. They didn't expect that. I think they're going to give Geno all the credit in the world, even if he struggles.
He's got a pass this year. Jared Goff, Detroit knows the wheels can fall off of that at any point in time. Daniel Jones, maybe. Derek Carr, I don't see New Orleans doing that, the New Orleans fans, but it's possible. Jordan Love, too early. I think it's too early for them to If it happens, it's going to be like middle to end of the season. But you have to think that if they're in a situation where they're like losing by a lot and getting booed off, I don't think it's going to be as a result of the quarterback play. It might be a result of the defense. I keep looking.
They should be booing the defense more often than they do. Yeah. I mean, that should be clear. But
for Garoppolo, I just see him in Oakland. Well, he got into a fight today got into a scuffle with a receiver today in training camp. And
that rules. What?
And the receiver had to go like run laps as a result of it. Like, I could see the Oakland thing going poorly after about 4 weeks.
It's Las Vegas, James.
Sorry, the Las Vegas thing. As somebody who's like was just in Vegas, I feel like
that stadium like looms over you, man.
It does. We were over. We stayed over at the Luxor, and it stares at you. It's right there. It's
especially like if you park at the, like, I don't know if you rented a car or anything like that, but if you park at the Luxor, it's like the only thing. It's like mountains and that stadium.
Yeah, that is all that stares at you. Yeah, nothing like going to Vegas in 115 degree heat. It was an experience. I will tell you that. If you've never seen a thunderstorm in Las Vegas, it's like you're on Mars. It is amazing to watch. You get rained on and you're not wet. It is remarkable.
Okay, that's crazy.
All right, so that is going to be the end of the 10th anniversary special of Norse Code. Hope you guys enjoyed this extra long episode. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I'm back to covering the Vikings beat. I've got basically 2 or 3 stories coming out every day covering the Vikings. So training camp reports, story of the day, whether it's like Daniil Hunter, Dalton Risner, quarterback, stuff like that. So I've got a bunch of content over at profootballnetwork.com/author/ahassan. I'm covering the Vikings more in depth this year than I did last year. So hopefully everyone enjoys that.
Well, enjoy that. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, hope you guys enjoyed it. We are going to be recording a little bit more often as we get into training camp and preseason games and then into the regular season. A reminder that the Hell League registration for the drawing is now open. Email me at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com or DM the Twitter account or the Threads account. So for Arif and for Dusty and to all of you who have wished us well or listened to the show, thank you guys so much. And just remember that even 10 years later, Christian Ponder sucks. And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.